In today's video, we are going to be getting the Platinum Trophy and all of the DLC trophies for 100% trophy list completion for The Witcher 3. Some of you guys may know I have already covered both the main game and the DLC on this channel before, but they were both separate videos, with the main game being sometime last year and the DLC being at the beginning of this year. Now, seeing as you guys seem to like it when I combined all of my Watch Dogs videos and their DLC videos together, I thought why not do it with this one. That, and I'm currently in the process of making a much bigger Platinum video where I'm completing a whole series of games. Not sure whether or not I'll upload them separately and then combine them into one, or whether I'll just do one big video all in one go. We'll have to figure that out when the time comes. Either way, this will give me a little bit more time. Whether you've seen both of my videos before or whether you're new to the channel, I hope you enjoy the video. Now, this game comes in at a 7 out of 10 difficulty and comes in at around about 100 hours. Add the DLC onto that and you've easily got a 120 plus hour Platinum. Seems extremely long, but trust me, it's worth every hour that you spend. Difficulty wise, it mainly comes down to two main things. There's a hell of a lot of missable quests and other things which are needed for missable trophies, and by other things needed for missable trophies, the main thing I'm talking about here are the over 100 different Gwent cards that we need to collect for the card collector trophy, many of which are missable. And on top of having a boatload of missables, we also have to complete the main game on Death March difficulty, which if you're not prepared for it, it can really prove to be an absolute pain in the arse. So dodging as many attacks as you can and not getting greedy is really going to be your friend here. But like an absolute madman, I also completed each of the DLCs on Death March as well. Not even needed for a trophy, but seeing as I will have completed the main game on Death March, it felt a bit cheap lowering the difficulty just for the DLC, and by the end of the main game, Death March really isn't a Death March. And now I get to say that I have a 100% fully completed Death March only playthrough. Anyway, we've got a hell of a long one today, folks, so without further ado, let's get into perhaps one of my favourite games of all time and get that 100%. The story begins with our boy Geralt dreaming of Kaer Morhen, home of the Wolf School of Witchers. We find our main man trying to have a nice relaxing bath before a weird lobster looking thing decides to crawl in and take a crack at our balls. Turns out though, it wasn't a real lobster and was actually conjured by everyone's favourite sorceress, Yennefer of Vengerberg, and she's naked. However, our boy doesn't get lucky today and is instead sent to go and find Ciri, who is training to become a Witcher. We then beat her in a race and go on to do a little bit of training ourselves, and I actually decided to use this section to nab a couple of combat related trophies early on so that I didn't have to worry about them later. The first was the Kaer Morhen Train trophy for performing 10 effective counterattacks in a row without getting hit or parrying, and the second was the What Was That trophy for performing an attack, a counter, a sign cast and a bomb throw in under 4 seconds. After getting those trophies, everything starts getting a little too chilly, and the Wild Hunt then appears, who wants Ciri because of her elder blood and the powers that come with it. But before we can do anything to stop them, we awaken from the dream and find ourselves with our mentor and friend Vesemir. Turns out we were searching for Yennefer and the trail led us to White Orchard, but before we could head into the small village, we get attacked by ghouls and get our first real taste of combat on Death March difficulty. Gonna be completely honest with you here, a lot of people would have you believe this is an extremely tough fight on Death March. While I can fully understand the reasons why, truth is, it's actually not. As long as you utilise your Quen shield sign and dodge like your life depends on it, because I guess in a way it actually does, beating these ghouls are pretty easy. Once we reached the village, our first port of call was the pub to knock back a couple of pints and get information on Yennefer's whereabouts, which we find out thanks to this humble merchant that she was last seen headed towards a local Nilfgaardian garrison. But before we set off, we had one more important thing to take care of.
You strike me as a man of the world. Are you familiar with Gwent?
No, and I don't have time to learn.
But the rules are quite simple. Come, let's play.
Why not?
Yes, that was to learn how to play Gwent, and we get our hands on our first Gwent deck. Now I actually really like Gwent, it's a fun little mini game that we have more than enough opportunities to play throughout the game, but it's also something that perhaps caused me the most stress throughout the game. You see, there is a trophy called Card Collector that requires us to collect at least one of every card available in the base game. These can be found in numerous different ways, but most commonly require us to purchase them from vendors or win them from other players. The trouble is, there are so many of them to collect, and there's also a decent amount of missable cards, and missing just one of these would lock us out of the trophy for the entire playthrough. So although finding Yennefer and Ciri is Geralt's priority, my priority is getting these poxy things. Continuing on with the story, we eventually make our way over to the garrison, but before the commander was willing to hand over what he knew on Yennefer, he first wanted us to take down a griffin that had been terrorizing his men and the local village, and as our favourite pastime is killing monsters, we say yes. Thankfully, the griffin wasn't too far away and wasn't actually that difficult to take care of, which honestly I did not expect. This is my first time playing Deathmarch, and as this was technically a boss fight in a way, I was expecting it to give me quite a bit of trouble, but apparently I'm either extremely skilled or extremely lucky because we took it down first try. Before reporting our success back to the commander though, I decided to quickly knock out another trophy, and that was the Power Overwhelming trophy for having all possible Place of Power bonuses active at the same time. For those of you not sure what a Place of Power is, it's essentially a runestone left over from the conjunction of spheres with a highly concentrated source of magical power that provides boosts to each of our abilities for a limited time, and can prove quite handy especially in the early stages of the game. With another trophy out of the way though, we head back to the garrison to report our success, and the commander tells us that Yennefer has travelled to Vizima, so with that information we head back to the village pub to inform Vesemir. Turns out though, Yennefer was also looking for us, meaning that all that hard work we put into taking down the griffin was for nothing really. She tells us that she has been working with Emperor Emir and that he has an offer for us, and so we set off to meet the Nilfgaardian ruler. However, on the way are chased by the Wild Hunt, but thankfully Yennefer has magic and was able to stop them so we could escape. Once at Vizima, we have another bath and then meet with the Emperor himself. He tells us that he wants us to help him find his daughter Ciri, who also just so happens to be our adopted daughter, which makes the whole thing a little bit awkward. He promises a hefty reward for finding her, and we say that we'll do it. Not for the money though, and purely out of concern for Ciri. Before leaving to begin our search though, we first
Wouldn't mind a few rounds of cards.
We then leave Vizima and find ourselves travelling to the swampy shithole of Velen. In Velen we find ourselves heading to a small village called Crow's Perch, where we are introduced to the Bloody Baron. He tells us that Ciri had in fact passed through here, however wasn't prepared to give us any information to help find our daughter before we help him, because of course. Turns out his wife and daughter had also gone missing, but they had gone missing because he was an arsehole and a drunk who had a knack for beating his wife. He tells us that he regrets everything that's happened and just wants us to bring them home and to ensure that they are safe. And so, not really having much of a choice as we need the information he has, we agree. Before doing that though, we had a few things to take care of first. We played some more Gwent, took part in a horse race and absolutely smashed it, something that we'll be doing a decent amount of in this game, and most notably meeting back up with an old friend called Kira Metz.
Missed a spot.
Where?
Turns out Kira also had information on Ciri, and she tells us that an elf not so long ago had recently been asking after her. Thankfully, she knew where this elf was hiding out at the time, and so we both head over there to see if we can find him. While investigating the elven ruins, we run into the Wild Hunt, who seems to have also been led to this cave, and after fighting them off, we find a projection message left by the elf for Ciri telling her that this location is no longer safe and to not spend too long here. However, no more information is revealed, but Kira does suggest investigating a group of crones hiding within Crookback Bog. We didn't leave the ruins completely empty-handed though, as while making our way through we made sure to loot absolutely everything, which managed to nab us the Bookworm trophy for reading a total of 30 books, journals and other documents. After leaving the ruins, Kira asks us if we can help her with some personal errands. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about this, but just know that we helped lift a curse on a nearby village, during which we managed to nab the trophy Let's Cook for learning 12 different potion recipes, which leads Kira to inviting inviting us on a date, which of course we can't refuse as witchers have to get their leg over as well. And after things get a little too steamy to show on YouTube, we awaken the next day to find out that she had made a quick getaway. Turns out that she headed over to the same tower that was key in lifting the curse in the village in search for some notes that could be found there, as she plans on using them to bargain with King Radovid. We tell her to do as she pleases with them, and in return she promises to help us if we need her in the future, making progress towards the missable trophy Full Crew, and also unlocking the trophy Friends with Benefits for completing her subplot. Back to the main quest, our search for the Baron's wife and daughter leads us to discovering that the Baron's wife Anna actually had a miscarriage and the baby was never given a proper burial. This in turn transformed it into a creature known as a botchling who attacks those that scorned it as well as feeds on pregnant women. Our plan was to help this botchling pass on to the afterlife and using its blood ties to lead us towards the Baron's family. No idea how this works, just know that the plan did work and the spirit led us to a family that had plenty of information on the two missing individuals. Apparently the Baron's wife Anna had been carried off into the bog by some kind of creature, but the family did notice that just before this Anna had a symbol burned into her hand. They also tell us that the Baron's daughter was here as well, but is now currently searching for her mother and has travelled to Oxenfurt to enlist some help. Thankfully, Kira had already suggested looking into the Crones of Crookback Bog, and so with two leads now pointing us in that direction, we set off to find Anna and Ciri. After trekking through the bog, we eventually come across a small settlement where we find a bunch of kids as well as an older woman called Gran. We ask her if she's seen Ciri, and although she didn't want to help us out, the kids did. And after playing some hide and seek, one of them points us in the direction of someone called Johnny that could be found nearby. Turns out this Johnny was a godlin, however he couldn't give us any information as he had lost his voice, and so we had to help him find it.
Whiskey! Slither! Ringworm! Rubbish! Bumblebee! Flabbergasted! Ha! The sound of it! Peter Piper picked Prince Proxima a pack of pickled peppers by the pontar.
Done celebrating?
Turns out it had been magically contained within a bottle, which Johnny goes on to tell us was the Crones doing. He also tells us that the Crones are as old as the forest itself and aren't the type of people you want to cross. He also reveals that he had seen Ciri while taking a morning dump running from something through the woods towards the children's hut, and agrees to convince Gran to allow us an audience with the ladies of the wood in the hopes that they can tell us more. Turns out they do have information on Ciri, but like everyone else in this game so far, we have to do something for them first. You see, they had tasked us with taking out some kind of monster in the forest who had taken a liking to killing people in the nearby village. This monster was a tree, and it's here that we are given quite a major decision. We can either spare the tree, in turn freeing the children and Granny from the Crones in the bog, but doing so means it will continue to feed on the villagers, or we can kill it to stop the continuous killings of the villagers. Now the Crones had told us that if we kill it they would give us the information they have on Ciri, and so we of course decide to kill the tree, in turn saving the villagers from death. Not entirely sure if this was the best decision though, as once we get back to Gran and the kids we are instead greeted by the Crones, who definitely catfished us as they look different to say the least, and it is implied that they had also eaten the kids. Yeah, what the actual fuck. We also come to find out that Gran is actually the Baron's wife and was under the control of the Crones. However, there was nothing that we could do for her just yet. Even though these creatures were actually diabolical, they did keep their word and told us that Ciri had managed to escape getting eaten by them and had run off towards the Baron's keep, which we already knew, so again, all of this was just a massive waste of time that ended up in a bunch of kids getting eaten. Nice job, Geralt.
Midday already.
We tell the Crones that we won't let them get away with their atrocities, however they taunt us as they make an exit, taking Anna with them. With this new information though, we head back to Crow's Perch and inform the Baron of what we have discovered. But first...
In the mood for a round of Gwent?
I'm always in the mood for Gwent.
Let's lay him down.
After giving him an absolute thrashing in Gwent and sharing what we have found regarding his family, he stays true to his word and tells us everything else he knows regarding Ciri, and that she eventually left the keep and made her way towards Novigrad. And although we haven't yet completed this questline, we are rewarded with the Family Counselor trophy. Before heading to Novigrad though, we know that the Baron and his men most likely won't be able to handle what awaits them in the bog, and so we meet up with him and his men to launch an assault on the Crones. Although we don't find the Crones, we do find Anna as well as the Baron's daughter, who had come with a team of men to rescue her mother, and together we fight off a massive fiend as well as a bunch of other monsters. And after clearing the area, the Baron somewhat makes amends with his daughter and then takes Anna away to hopefully get her the treatment she needs. This does however bring us an end to his questline, and and we can now turn our focus back onto finding Ciri. Of course, on the way to Novigrad we end up getting a little bit sidetracked and find ourselves taking on a few Witcher contracts to earn us some scratch. One of these contracts involved us finding and killing a monster known as a Shrieker, which actually managed to nab us a trophy of the same name. And we also managed to unlock another combat related trophy, that being the triple threat trophy for killing 3 opponents in one fight using 3 different methods. We eventually make it to the great city of Novigrad, and it really was great, mainly because it wasn't a shithole. Although in every great city there are not so great people controlling it, with one of these groups essentially being racists towards anyone that isn't 100% human. This group is known as the Eternal Fire, and as they were in bed with Radovid, they were allowed to pretty much do whatever they like to whatever they consider to be lesser beings, and as proof of how bad this group was, our first visit to the city of Novigrad had us witnessing a sorceress and a Doppler being burned alive, which only hurts more as they were our friends. Unfortunately, we couldn't do anything to help them though, and so we continue to set out and find Triss. Turns out she was working with someone known as the King of Beggars and was currently running some errands for him. Now Triss, for those of you who don't know, is Geralt's ex. Essentially, Geralt had at some point during the previous games lost his memory, causing him to forget that he was in love with Yennefer, and he ended up falling in love with Triss. Then he got his memory back and parred her off, so I'm sure none of this is going to cause any awkward situations later on in the game.
You didn't answer my question. How's Yen?
She's fine.
That's good.
Asking about anything specific?
Never mind. I got my answer.
It was at this moment he knew. He fucked up.
We asked Triss if she had seen Ciri, and although she hadn't, she agrees to help us look for her. In the meantime though, she asks us to help her with a few errands of her own, one of these being catching rats. Now I'm going to be completely honest here, there is an absolute ton of stuff that we have to do in Novigrad quest wise, so I'm not going to go into an extreme amount of detail for all of it, otherwise we would be here for quite some time. But I will quickly brush over everything that's important in relation to the story. So after helping Triss, she points us in the direction of a dream interpreter, also known as an Aneromancer, who may have more answers, and after saving her from a mischievous godlin, she induces a dream where it is revealed that Dandelion had been imprisoned, and so after running a few more errands for everyone else, one of these being a contract on a Doppler that nabs us another trophy, we eventually break into the Eternal Fire's headquarters, obtaining Dandelion's location, and we then team up with our old friend Zoltan, a Doppler by the name of Dudu, and Dandelion's love interest called Priscilla, where we manage to set a trap and rescue Dandelion from the clutches of the Eternal Fire. Turns out though,
Geralt, must you ruin everything? I had him just where I wanted him.
regardless of whether or not Dandelion thought he could have escaped by himself, we do get another story-related trophy for rescuing him. Dandelion then tells us what happened during his time with Ciri. He reveals that they had been on the run from a crime lord called Whoreson Jr., but she had vanished just when they had come to a dead end, leaving Dandelion to get captured. He explains that she had gone to Whoreson in order to get help in repairing a device known as a phylactery, which she said was needed to help lift a curse, although she never mentioned who was cursed. But she did keep repeating the words of the curse, which may come in use later on. With no sign of Ciri though, we decide our next stop would be the Skellige Isles to team up with Yen, who had believed to have found signs of Ciri being on one of the islands. However, before we get to Skellige, let's talk about some of the other things that we did in Novigrad first, as a lot of it is essential for missable trophies that we can obtain later in the game. So while progressing through the main quest, we also found ourselves taking part in a few other subplots, most notably revolving around helping Triss and some of the crime lords of Novigrad. One of these crime lords being Sigmund Dijkstra, who we once had a disagreement with and ended up in him getting a broken ankle on our behalf. We beat him in Gwent and he requested our help in locating some treasure that was stolen from him, which we soon find out Ciri had stolen as payment for the phylactery that Whoreson Jr. said he could repair. She never brought him the payment though, and so he took it upon himself to take Dudu hostage and beat him when he got bored until Ciri had come and rescued him. We avoid telling Siggy about Ciri's involvement though, and instead gave him a key to a vault that we liberated off of Menga when finding Dandelion's location. We also find ourselves working with King Radovid, who had a fixation with finding a sorceress called Philippa Eilhart. While he had previously cut out her eyes, she survived and his hatred ran deep. He wanted to ensure that the job was finished and so hired us to find her. While we didn't find Philippa, we did find a megascope crystal that indicated she was still very much alive, but we avoided telling Radovid this and instead told him that she must have died in a fire when some witch hunters had raided her hideout. Vernon Roche was also another man that we had helped here, although the most notable thing that we done for him was help him rescue one of his soldiers called Vez that had decided to attack a Nilfgaardian camp all on her own. And finally, but perhaps most importantly, we helped Triss rescue the mages hiding out in Novigrad and assisted them in escaping the city. I really like this questline because we actually got to have a little break from all the killing and attended a party hosted by a well-off family called the Vegelbuds, who were also assisting Triss in her grand plan. But we wasn't there to party. We took this opportunity to play more Gwent, where we managed to nab the Geralt and Friends trophy for winning a round of Gwent using only neutral cards, and where we also had the opportunity to kiss Triss, because Geralt is a dirty dog and he can't help himself when it comes to the ladies. After sucking each other's faces off, and with the help of Dijkstra, we then help Triss get all of the mages out of the city, preventing them from becoming toast, and where we then have one of the most debated choices in the entirety of the game. You see, we have the option to tell Triss we love her, resulting in her staying behind and us rekindling our romance in more ways than one. However, I am Team Yennefer, and so for this playthrough, we tell her,
I'll remember you too. Always with a smile.
Miss Marigold!
Coming! Take care, and give Ciri a kiss from me once you find her.
yes, fucking awkward, and what's even more awkward is that Dijkstra watched the entire thing play out. Yikes. She'll still help us later on in the game when we need her though, so regardless of the romantic outcome, it's still a win in my book. Dijkstra then casually brings up his plan to murder King Radovid and asks for our help in doing so, however that quest will come a little bit later on. Now you may have noticed the distinct lack of trophies for completing any quest during this section, but don't be alarmed as we did manage to unlock a few miscellaneous trophies. The first being the Can't Touch This trophy for killing 5 enemies in a fight without taking damage and without using Quen, which these rats down in the sewers helped me get pretty damn easily, and because we are an absolute loot goblin we managed to find out the formulae for 6 different bomb types, nabbing us the Bombardier trophy. With everything in Novigrad and its surrounding areas for the most part done for the time being, it was finally time to head to Skellige, and after paying a hefty 1,000 smackaroons, we set sail. Unfortunately, our travels across the sea wasn't the fairest and our ship ends up getting attacked by a group of pirates, causing the ship to go down. It wasn't all bad though, as a few hours later we awakened on the shore of one of the Skellige Isles and even managed to get our gold back from the now dead ship captain. Nice. Just for that, I think I'm definitely going to give this guy a 5-star review on Uber. After getting our bearings, we head to the nearby castle where we find Yennefer and attend the late King Bran's funeral. Of course, just because it's a funeral doesn't mean our boy can't flirt, which honestly, probably not the best place to do so, but hey, Geralt be Geralt. We then head up with Yennefer to attend the wake with the rest of the Skelligans, however she was there for another reason entirely. We were here to break into one of the court's advisors' workshop to steal the mask of Uroboros? Uroboros? Yeah, whatever that says. That will allow us to see glimpses of the past through magical imprints left in the world, and Yen hopes that this will help us track down Ciri. So after a bit of snooping around, we end up tripping balls, killing a bunch of stuffed animals and getting our hands on the mask. We then end up meeting up with Krakon Crate, and even though we had just stolen something from his castle, he still gives us permission to investigate an area on one of the isles that had recently been the site of a magical explosion believed to have been caused by Ciri. He also asks us to assist both his son and daughter that were currently out on their own little adventures, and of course we want that missable trophy at the end of it, so we agree, but that will come a little bit later. For now, let's focus on Ciri. We meet Yen at the site of the magical explosion, get another trophy for killing 50 enemies using the environment, and using the mask we were able to see what the magical imprints had left behind. We find out that Ciri was in fact on the island and as such may still be, however she was currently being chased by the hunt. Ermion then points us towards the town of Lofoten where the wild hunt had previously attacked, and so we head there to investigate further. The survivors of the attack tell us that Ciri was recently in the village and was last seen with someone by the name of Craven. We learn that Craven, real name Skjarl, was actually dead, but thanks to us having a sorceress on our team, Yen used her magic to reanimate his lifeless corpse to obtain more information. Skjarl tells us that a mysterious man, most likely the elf believed to have been helping Ciri, had brought her to the town shortly before the attack, and that while there, she had seen her fair share of old lady boobies. Then when the Wild Hunt arrived, he helped her escape the town and witnessed the mysterious man use magic to knock her out and sailed out to sea. Skarl had also been knocked out by the Wild Hunt, however managed to catch a glimpse of a weird looking creature called Uma that we had previously seen back at the Baron's Keep in the shithole of Velen. And yes, I am going to keep referring to it as a shithole. Yennefer comes to the conclusion that this creature could be the key to finding Ciri, and so our next goal was to head back to Velen to get our hands on the little rascal. Oh, and we also get another story related trophy for obtaining the information from Skarl's corpse. Before heading back though, we still had a little bit to do in Skellige. We first helped Krakoncrate's daughter Ceres break the curse that afflicted one of the Skellige Isle clan's leaders by chucking his baby into a fire. Don't be alarmed though, no babies were actually harmed during the process and was actually a trick to break the possession that a monster called a Him held over Uldarich. And we also helped Krak's son Hjalmir take down a giant that he had set off to kill in order to reclaim the island for its original clan. It was not all well and good just yet though, as shortly after returning to Krak with his children, the castle is attacked by bears that were actually once people. It seemed these people were afflicted with a curse of some kind that turned them into what is referred to as a berserker, and that someone had purposely forced this transformation, which we discover was actually the result of the late King Bran's wife, who was hoping to outcast the Oncrates, allowing her son to rule over the islands. Her plan didn't work out so well though, as now she faced death.
I sentence to death. You will be chained to a rock, to perish of hunger and thirst, and sea fowl will peck apart your remains.
But with that, we had successfully dabbed in politics and helped the island crown a new monarch, unlocking the trophy Kingmaker, even though Ceres was a woman, so technically it should have been called Queenmaker, but you know, whatever, potato potato. With another subplot now completed, rather than continuing on with the main quest, I decided to go around and do quite a decent amount of cleanup, mainly on the Isle of Skellige, and the reasons why I made this decision is 1, because we will get locked out of quite a decent amount of quests that we need to complete in order to get our hands on a few trophies. 2, we needed as much XP and as much powerful gear as possible for the fight ahead, and going into these upcoming battles without being properly equipped, especially on Death March difficulty, can make certain points feel nigh on impossible due to the amount of damage the enemies can take and deal. And 3, it would make any remaining cleanup that we needed to do after the main story a hell of a lot easier and quicker, as most of it would then be tied to Novigrad and Velen. Well, okay, let's rewind a minute. I called it by its actual name. I meant shithole. There is quite a lot to go through here, so I'm not going to be going into all of it, as again it would take quite some time, so we are just going to quickly go through what we done and the trophies we unlocked while doing it. So while going through the game and this whole cleanup stage, we have been playing everyone we possibly can at Gwent for the missable cards and trophies, with our first Gwent related trophy being the all-in trophy that we got by playing 3 hero cards in a single round of Gwent and winning the match. We then ignited the gas produced by Dragon's Dream Bombs, using it to burn an opponent to death 10 times, unlocking the That Is the Evilest Thing trophy. We discovered our 100th fast travel point for the Globetrotter trophy. We completed 2 contracts, killing each of the monsters without using signs, potions, mutagens, oils or bombs for the Even Odds trophy. We successfully won every single horse race in the game, unlocking the Fast and Furious trophy, something which I'd also been making progress towards throughout the story. We completed the contract on a monster known as the Woodland Spirit, unlocking a trophy of the same name. We completed another contract on a vampire known as Sarasti, unlocking the Fearless Vampire Slayer trophy. We defeated the champion of unarmed combat Olaf. Yes, it's a damn bear, because apparently a bear is allowed to be a champion of unarmed combat, but beating it did nab us the Brawler trophy. Continuing on our fist fighting escapades, we then took down a rock troll, officially making us the champion of champions in unarmed combat, unlocking the Brawlmaster trophy. We then entered a high stakes Gwent tournament in Novigrad, and because we had a pretty serious deck and we were at this point pretty much a Gwent master, we absolutely smashed the competition, unlocking the trophy Gwent Master. We successfully helped the remaining potential allies that we could use to bring to a fight later in the game, with our final ally being Ermion, unlocking the Full Crew trophy. We completed another contract on an Earth Elemental called Therazan, unlocking the Ashes to Ashes trophy. And we finally went around destroying all of the remaining monster nests in Skellige, unlocking both the Fire in the Hole trophy for destroying 10 nests using bombs, as well as the Pest Control trophy for destroying all nests in the region. And so, with quite a decent amount of cleanup now out of the way and a lot of XP earned, I turned my focus back onto the main quest line. Now, even though this next quest technically isn't a main quest, I consider it one, as realistically, nearly everybody's main quest in life is to find the love of their life, and that extends to our boy Geralt. For this quest, Yennefer had asked for our assistance in finding something known as a djinn, but she didn't want to just hunt down a djinn for its power. You see, many years ago, Geralt had made his last wish with a djinn, and his wish was that him and Yennefer would be bound together forever. Sounds like true love, right? Well, Yennefer didn't think so, and she wanted us to ask the djinn to take that wish back to see if our connection truly was based on love or was just the work of a djinn. Kinda pissed if that was the case, as we had friend-zoned Triss earlier in the game, but regardless, we agreed to help. Of course, we couldn't just rub a lamp and ask the djinn to take back the wish, we needed to best it in combat, and I'm gonna be honest, this was perhaps one of the most annoying fights in the entire game so far. The djinn was extremely powerful and absolutely demolished my health with every attack. Seriously, I never found myself running away as much as I did in this fight, but in the end, we were able to take the djinn down and forced it to remove the spell that binds Geralt and Yennefer together. Turns out this whole fight was for nothing though, as even though our eternal bond was allegedly broken, she still loved us and we still loved her.
I love you, Yen.
And I love you.
So now with all of that out of the way and our love life still intact, we could press on with the main story. We head back to the shithole, pick up Uma, and then travel to Kaer Morhen to meet with Yen and the other witches. Yennefer comes to the conclusion that this creature may actually be a person that had been cursed, but breaking the curse wouldn't be so easy. You see, this creature would need to undergo the Trial of Grasses, which is essentially the extremely painful procedure the witches go through in order to become witches, and to top it off, the procedure may not even work and may just end up killing Uma instead, but Yen, being the stone cold witch that she is, doesn't give a damn and we proceed with it anyway. But first we give Yennefer a taste of our white wolf. After watching the creature go through an immense amount of pain and almost losing its life in the process, we find out that the trial was actually a success and we were able to remove the curse afflicting Uma, which does in fact reveal a person that was trapped inside its body, which Geralt recognises to be an elven sage called Avalark, the same elf that had been helping Ciri throughout the game. Avalark tells us that Ciri is hidden away on the Isle of Mists in order to prevent the Wild Hunt from finding her. However, she was no longer safe there and it was only a matter of time before the hunt would show up, and so we waste no time in heading back to Skellige to find this misty island. Once we get to the island, we witness a dwarf fall to his death and then find his brothers who were sharing a cabin with Ciri. However, it became immediately apparent that Ciri had seen much better days. Yeah, this is a pretty sad moment for Geralt, but now was not the time for tears, as thankfully Avalark's weird magical orb that had guided us to the island also managed to bring Ciri back to the land of the living. We then sit by the fire and have a little catch up before making a move. Ciri reveals to us that the Wild Hunt are hunting her because they want her powers. You see, their home world is facing annihilation, and so they decided to invade our world instead, although the Wild Hunt doesn't have the ability to move all of their forces to this world and so want her powers to do so. Obviously, this is bad as it would pretty much mean that everybody in our world would be facing quite a gruesome end. To combat this, Avallac'h had been teaching Ciri to control her powers in the hopes that it may eventually be used to repel the Wild Hunt and stop our world's impending doom. And we also unlock another story-related trophy for finding Ciri. After catching up with Ciri though, we decide to head back to Kaer Morhen, but unfortunately have to get teleported as a bunch of dwarves decided to steal our boat. Unfortunately, this led the Wild Hunt straight to us, but thankfully we had been planning for this and managed to call upon a bunch of our friends that we had been helping throughout the game to assist us in holding them back. Even though we put up a pretty decent fight against the Hunt, we were still losing pretty badly, which unfortunately resulted in Vesemir losing his life.
Were an unruly child. I adored that about you. Now fly!
After seeing him die though, Ciri seems to lose control of her powers and lets out a tremendous scream that was so loud and I assume painful as it kills a few of the Wild Hunt and forces them to retreat. Before Ciri's uncontrollable outburst kills us all though, Avallac'h appears and manages to use some magical elven words to seemingly knock her out. Once again, this is a pretty painful moment for Geralt. Not only did he not so long ago get the scare of his life when he thought Ciri was dead, but now one of his best friends had lost their life as well. I'm not crying. You are. We then hold a funeral for our good friend and say our tearful goodbyes, allowing him to finally get the rest he deserves. Even though we had repelled the Hunt and lost a good friend in the process, the fight against the Hunt must continue. Yennefer and Avallac'h decides that in order to even stand a chance against them, we must get more help. More specifically, help from the Lodge of Sorceresses, as we was going to need as much magic as we could get. Even though we were against asking the Lodge for help, we reluctantly agree as we are a simp for Yen and we will agree to anything she says. Yen and Triss then decide to set out to find and contact the Lodge, and we tell them that we will meet them in Novigrad shortly. But first, we cheer Ciri up by having a snowball fight, which of course we won. And then the next day, Ciri decides she wants to avenge Vesemir and head back to the shithole of Velen. You see, the crones of Crookback Bog would be holding their Witch's Sabbath at Bald Mountain, where their guest of honour is the absolute arsehole that took Vesemir's life, Ilmarith. Of course, we want to get our revenge, and so we travel back to the You thought I was going to say it, didn't you? We eventually reach Bald Mountain with Ciri, and while there decide that not only does Ilmarith have to die, but so do the crones. Of course, we both want that sweet, sweet revenge on Ilmarith, so instead we invoke an age-old tradition in order to decide who kills who. Yep, Ciri lost, so while we set out to find Ilmarith, Ciri set out to find the crones. We then have a pretty lengthy fight against the crones, as I can't lie, having 3 of them to take down all at once is a bit of a pain even while playing as Ciri. After taking them down though, we discover that one of them was actually playing dead, and she manages to take Vesemir's Witcher medallion that Ciri was wearing and unfortunately makes an escape.
Come here.
While all that is happening though, Geralt is facing off with Ilmarith. Honestly, the fight itself wasn't too bad. Granted, he hits pretty hard, but his moveset is quite slow and very easy to predict. Of course, apart from the times you don't predict it. Obviously, we managed to take Ilmarith down and get one of the most satisfying kills in The Witcher 3.
Who told you to fight like this?
The Witcher you slew.
After the fight, we then decide to take a quick break with Ciri to catch our breath before continuing on ahead. And we also make sure to pick up the only magic acorn in the game and then refuse to give it to the villagers, because you should never willingly give someone your nut unless they worked hard for it, which they didn't. At this point, we then head back to Novigrad with Ciri to meet back up with everyone else, but before continuing on with the main quest, I managed to nab a couple more trophies. The first was the Armed and Dangerous trophy for crafting and equipping all pieces of Witcher gear from a single Witcher set, and the Mutant trophy for putting a mutagen in all 4 available slots. Back in Novigrad, we find out that 2 sorceresses from the lodge, Philippa, essentially the head of the lodge, and Marguerite was actually in the area. However, both of them were in a spot of bother, and so we needed to help them. First, we worked with Triss and headed down to Dijkstra's bathhouse, where he had managed to semi-capture Philippa. I say semi-capture because although he brought his old flame there, she was the one giving him a hard time. But thankfully, Philippa is blind and we are not, and so after taking out her mind-controlled lackeys and backing her into a dead end, we took a casual stroll up to her and managed to subdue her. And then we meet up with Yennefer and help break Marguerite out of prison after she had been captured by some witch hunters. After saving both of them, they say that they will assist us in the fight ahead and that we are to meet them back at Dandelion's Inn. Before heading back though, we first had to meet back up with Dijkstra and his crew. So if you remember earlier, before heading to Skellige, Dijkstra asked us for help in killing King Radovid, and now we finally get the chance to do so. Now this is a pretty important choice in the game, as taking out King Radovid essentially ensures that the Nilfgaardians and Emir win the ongoing war. While I actually dislike both of them, Radovid is a racist, and he's treated us like shit despite our efforts earlier, so for me, this was an easy choice. We managed to lure Radovid to an area in Novigrad where we were able to fight through his army while watching him run away like a little girl. We unfortunately don't get the killing blow though, and instead Philippa gets her long-awaited revenge, burning out his eyes and then stabbing him in the back. With Radovid now taken down, we all decide to meet back up to discuss what happens next, but it turns out that Dijkstra had actually double-crossed us and had other plans now that Radovid was dead. You see, he had us believe that this was to help Emir win the war and essentially to stop the senseless killing of mages and other non-100% normal humans alike. However, his real plan was to now take lead of what remained of the Redanian army to continue the fight against Emir, and while he offers to spare us, he isn't willing to do the same for our accomplices, which, if you ask me, is a pretty big dick move, and so we decided to kill him, bringing the quest line to an end and unlocking another trophy. We head back to the inn where we find Avalark, and he tells us that with our success in taking down Ilmarith, we had actually dealt a massive blow to Eredin and the Wild Hunt, and as such has devised a plan to deal an even bigger blow. You see, one of Eredin's generals, Gels, was once a devoted follower of his king, but what he didn't know is that Eredin was the one who had poisoned him, and so the hope was that we could travel to his homeworld of Tir Nalia and convince Gels to turn his back on Eredin and betray him. We of course need every advantage we can get, and so we agree to help. We then find ourselves travelling through space and time to many different worlds, which honestly I would have loved for CD Projekt Red to have revisited and done something with, as there is truly some massive potential here, and even though we only get to see them for a brief amount of time, I genuinely enjoyed visiting each of them. Eventually though, we reach Tir Nalia and find Gels, which again I wish they did something more with this world, as it looks absolutely bloody gorgeous. We tell him of Eredin's dirty deeds, but of course he isn't willing to just take what we say at face value. Luckily, we have a dream interpreter to show him the proof, as apparently the dreams don't lie. So with that, we take him back to Novigrad and have the dream lady show him the truth. Thankfully, this manages to convince him enough to agree to betray Eredin, and even tells us that if we sail to Skellige and get our hands on an artifact known as the Sunstone, we will be able to summon the Wild Hunt ship known as the Naglfar, and Eredin will come along with it. As we succeed in getting Gels to betray Eredin though, we manage to unlock another trophy. Continuing on, we then help Ciri with a few personal errands and then get informed that Philippa and the other sorcerers of the lodge want to talk to her. We tell Ciri to go in and talk to them by herself, as we didn't want her to look like she needed someone to hold her hand, but of course me and Yennefer act like the typical worried parents and try and spy on the conversation, which was honestly absolutely hilarious.
I'll just have a peek.
Finally. Thought you wouldn't do it. Didn't have the gall. What do you see?
Philippa pontificating. Ciri pacing wall to wall. She stopped. She's saying something. Philippa's turned pale.
That's my Ciri. Probably gave her an earful.
Quiet. Here she comes. So?
You were eavesdropping.
Yes.
After Ciri's talk with the Lodge, it was now time to lure the hunt to Skellige and to launch our final attack. Back in Skellige, with the help of Philippa, we made our way through some ancient ruins, and after dealing with the oogly booglies inside, we get our hands on the Sunstone. While everyone prepares for the fight ahead, Ciri asked me and Yennefer to assist her with something that's been bothering her and us. You see, while Avallac'h has been helping her, we still don't actually know the full reason as to why, and so we decide to head to his hideout to try and find some incriminating evidence against him. While we don't necessarily find anything indicating any evil motives, we do find an elven woman who was honestly a bit of a bitch, and so that's why we decided to absolutely trash the place. Even the stern woman that Yennefer is got involved. Finally, before heading back to meet with everyone else, we then help Ciri once more by heading back to the village of Lofoten, where we give Skjarl a proper burial, and of course we 100% avoid telling her that Yennefer had reanimated his corpse. This though now brings us to our final main quest of the game, and it was time to fight the Wild Hunt and take down Eredin once and for all. We meet with Emir, where he agrees to help us in our fight against the Hunt and managed to get him to release Fringilla Vigo, the final sorceress that the Lodge needed. And then after taking our positions, we have Avallac'h use the Sunstone to bring the Wild Hunt to us.
The elven bauble worked.
They approach.
Of course, this wasn't going to be an easy fight, and Eredin's general Corintha uses his staff to freeze Geralt and the Nilfgaardian army in place. Thankfully though, Ciri sensed that we was in danger, and while she puts up a valiant fight against Corintha, she unfortunately doesn't manage to kill him, but she does manage to break his staff, freeing Geralt and the army from the ice. And then we finish what Ciri started and kill the general, plunging him down below into the icy depths of the ocean. With the general now down though, it was time to board the Naglfar and face Eredin. The fight itself wasn't actually too bad. I remember doing this on normal way back on release, and he was one tough cookie, but as I've been preparing for this fight for pretty much the whole game, he was much easier than I anticipated. I'm not saying I took him down in one hit, and I still had to put a fair amount of time and effort into actually beating him, but as long as I utilised my many different decotions and abilities at my disposal, we were eventually able to take him down and finally bring an end to the Wild Hunt. In his dying words though, he tells us that Avallac'h had actually tricked us both, and while we were fighting against each other, he had made off with Ciri. We then get ambushed by some of the monsters of the Wild Hunt, but thankfully Yennefer saves us and we get a trophy for killing Eredin. After escaping, it seems like Eredin might have been right after all, as all of a sudden we witness the gate between worlds open, and so of course we rush over towards the magical tower and confront Avallac'h. Once we get there though, we discover that Ciri actually wanted to help Avallac'h and enter the gate between worlds in order to prevent something known as the White Frost, which is essentially an end of the world event that would destroy not just life on our world, but every other world in existence, and that if she didn't stop it, everything that we had fought for essentially would be for nothing, and that the prophecy says that only a child of the Elder Blood would be able to stop it, and as she does have that magical blood coursing through her veins, she is the world's only hope. We are then given a choice that plays quite a big role in what type of ending we get, and as we have spent the majority of the game going for what is considered the good ending by supporting Ciri in her decisions instead of doubting her, we reluctantly agree to let her enter the portal to complete her quest.
To me. Please, not now.
Geralt, believe me. A tavern, old wine, our boots drying by the fire. I'd like nothing better. I can't. can't. I must try. For you, Yen, Triss, for everyone. Keep your fingers crossed.
We then see Ciri enter the gate and watch as she struggles to withstand the power of the White Frost, but thankfully all of the good memories we've given her convinces her to push on and keep fighting. We then witness the White Frost get brought to an end, however the gate closes with Ciri still inside. We then fast forward to 2 weeks later where we find Geralt at the Emperor's Palace in Vizima and we break the news to the Emperor of Ciri's death. He takes it better than we expect though, and he doesn't immediately order our head to be cut off, but he does tell us that he doesn't wish to see us ever again, which is perfectly fine in my book. Turns out though, Ciri never actually died and had managed to survive the White Frost and asked us to tell the Emperor that she was dead so that he wouldn't go looking for her. You see, Ciri quite liked the life of being a witcher, and after collecting a sword specially crafted and enchanted just for her, we then take a couple of contracts with Ciri until she eventually decides to follow her own path. This however does bring us to the end of the story of this absolutely phenomenal game, and we are rewarded with a total of 3 trophies. Passed the trial for finishing the game on any difficulty, ran the gauntlet for finishing the game on Blood and Broken Bones or Death March difficulty, and the Walked the Path trophy for finishing the game on Death March difficulty. Now I have to say guys, I had an absolutely phenomenal time going through and experiencing the story once again, and quite frankly, honestly so chuffed with myself that I managed to do it on Death March difficulty. But I'll save talking massively about it now so we can continue on with our remaining trophies. So with the main story out of the way, we could turn our focus onto the cleanup, and thankfully as we spent a lot of time during the main story making progress towards this stage, it didn't take very long to unlock the rest of the trophies. I'm not going to go into much detail here as we all know what the cleanup stage in 99% of games consist of, and even though it was now safe to change difficulty, I actually thoroughly enjoyed the extra challenge that Death March presented, and so I did all of the cleanup on Death March difficulty as well. The first trophy we unlocked was the Dendrologist trophy for fully maxing out and acquiring all abilities in a single skill tree. We then got the Munchkin trophy for reaching level 35. We took on all of the remaining Witcher contracts, nabbing us a total of 2 more trophies. The Fiend or Foe trophy for completing the contract on Morvad, and the Geralt the Professional trophy for completing all Witcher contracts in the game. We then farmed a couple of Skellige pirates for our remaining combat trophies, unlocking us the Humpty Dumpty trophy for killing 10 opponents by knocking them off of somewhere high up with the Ard sign. The Enemy of My Enemy trophy for using the Axii sign to force one opponent to kill another a total of 20 times. The Overkill trophy for making an opponent suffer from bleeding, poisoning and burning at the same time a total of 10 times. And the Master Marksman trophy for killing 50 enemies with a crossbow bolt to the head. Which brings us to our final trophy of the game, and that was the very easily missable card collector trophy. Now throughout the game I had made sure to obtain every missable Gwent card, as well as purchasing all available cards and playing every named NPC with a guaranteed card as a reward. But we still had a few more that we needed to get that were essentially RNG, as we needed to beat random opponents in a game of Gwent and just hope that we got a card we didn't have as a reward. Although it didn't take as long as I thought it would, as usually anything RNG usually gives me a tough time, but thankfully it only took us roughly an hour to obtain the remaining few cards that we needed. And of course getting our last one nabbed us our final trophy of the game, Card Collector, as well as the Limits of the Possible Platinum trophy. Yes boys, Limits of the Possible. The Platinum trophy for Witcher 3, oh my god, we've finally done it. Think it may be time for a celebration, Fap. And so with the main game both completed and platinumed, it was finally time to take on the DLCs. The first DLC I decided to take on was the Hearts of Stone DLC, and to kick things off I decided I was going to get one of the easiest trophies out of the way and headed over to a nearby field, where I then proceeded to slaughter a total of 20 cows, nabbing us a decent amount of food we can either eat or sell, and earning us the trophy Murderer, or Murdered, yeah, this. Although technically that wasn't the first trophy of the DLC. That award goes to the Killed It trophy for winning a round of Gwent with a total strength of at least 187, something which I earned while going for the main game's platinum trophy. With our first two trophies out of the way, it was time to start the main questline. We head over to a notice board where we find that a man named Olgierd von Everich had issued a contract on a beast that was hiding out in the sewers. To find out more information, we head to the Garen estate to speak with the contract issuer himself. Olgierd reveals that his cook had gone to a fair in Oxenfurt with her sister, and that her sister had told her of a prince that had been turned into a toad that now lurks in the sewers. His cook had ventured down into the sewers in search of her froggy prince, but alas was never seen again, and seeing as she wasn't the first woman to head down into the sewers, it wasn't likely that she had decided to live out her days with him down there, so now Olgierd wanted the beast dealt with. We of course head over to Oxenfurt and make our way down into the sewers. Once down there, we fight through our fair share of drowners until we eventually come across a woman.
Oh, no, you don't. Hear me? Don't you dare. Please, don't do this to me.
Shani?
Geralt?
What are you doing here?
This woman was Shani, coincidentally someone we haven't seen since The Witcher 1. Shani was a medic working with the Redanian army and had been given orders to come down into the sewers with a group of soldiers in order to hunt the toad. However, she was the only survivor. She tells us that she also has come down here as she wants to get a sample of its venom, as it has been contaminating the city's water supply, leaving its citizens and soldiers in a very bad way, and so we agreed to let her tag along. Continuing to fight our way through the drowners, we eventually find the toad's lair, and to lure him out, we decide the best course of action is to use a dead body as bait, and rather than hide to take it by surprise, which I assume would have been the smart thing to do, we instead wait right next to the dead body because we ain't no bitch. Eventually the toad shows up and we try our best to take it down. Not gonna lie, on Death March this fight is pretty damn difficult. Even though he is pretty slow moving, I did get hit quite a few times, and his tongue does insane amounts of damage as well as inflicts us with poison. After narrowly avoiding death a few times though, we do eventually take it down, nabbing us another trophy. Yes, it turns out that the legends were true and a man had in fact been transformed into a toad. But this wasn't just any man. This was an Aetheri prince, and seeing as we were the ones who just killed him, the Aetheri wasn't too happy about it and we get imprisoned and taken to Aether. Now even though it looked like we was in some deep khaki brown stuff, it turns out our luck was about to change. Not sure if it was for the better, but we take what we're given and we get a visit from an old acquaintance.
Greetings, Geralt. Remember me?
This is Gaunter O'Dim, a man you may recognise from the main game that gave us some information on Yennefer's whereabouts. He tells us that he's willing to help us escape certain death, but does request that after it's all over, we meet him at midnight at the crossroads near the village of Yantra. Of course, we don't really have any other options at this point, and so we agree, and he leaves us with a little something to remember him by before disappearing. And all of a sudden, the ship gets trapped in a massive storm, causing it to make an early stop. Not to fret though, as we do survive the storm, and while being moved by the Aetheri, we manage to break free, take them down and make an escape.
What kind of hell? Hurry, flames, water. This is the punishment for regicide and
After escaping, we meet up with Odim at the crossroads, where we are like, what the fuck was that, man? You're supposed to be a humble merchant. Although he wasn't willing to explain how he helped us escape, he did tell us what he wanted us to do in exchange for his help. Odim tells us that Olgierd actually knew the toad was an Aetheri prince and even knew he could have been cured. However, because he is a degenerate monster, he set us up to kill him, knowing the consequences that would befall us. He then tells us that Olgierd had once asked him for help on the understanding that one day he would need to pay him back, though what that payment is, he doesn't say. Since that day, Odim had tried to confront him for payment many times, however had been constantly turned away. Because of this, he decides it's time to invoke the pact that they had made. However, before he can do so, he must fulfill 3 wishes for Olgierd, and that this can only be done by the use of a proxy. That is where we come in. He wants us to be his proxy and fulfill Olgierd's 3 wishes, and tells us that the mark he gave us stays until we do. Of course, we agree and make our way over to Olgierd's estate to start granting some wishes. Once we get there though, we find his manor on fire, a man getting beheaded, and witness Olgierd take a sword through the back and not even flinch.
Not I.
You lie! Whoreson!
That man killed him. Alone. Unbeknownst to me. Out of fury, for your father refused us hospitality. For this willful violation of the chivalry code, he was summarily executed himself. Anything else I might do for you? Take her away. Now, where were we?
Yeah, so turns out Olgierd is immortal, in case you couldn't tell, which is of course just our luck. Odim then makes an appearance to make Olgierd aware that we are to be his proxy, and also reveals that Olgierd was the one who turned the prince into a toad in the first place. And yes, it was over a woman. Olgierd then tells Odim to leave and takes us aside to discuss his wishes. He tells us that he wants the house of Maximilian Barsodi and that he wants us to show his brother Vladimir the time of his life. And after fulfilling those 2 wishes, only then will he reveal his 3rd. Now you'd think getting someone's house would be the hardest part of this, but turns out that wasn't the case. His brother was going to be the toughest part of this endeavour, as he has actually been dead for many years. Although Odim does manage to help us out and gives us some blood that we can use in a blood summoning to summon his brother Vladimir. Even though we now knew how to summon Vladimir, we still didn't know where to find him, and so we decide to ask Shani for some help. Thankfully, she's able to help and tells us that he is buried in the von Everich family crypt at the family manor, and even agrees to come along with us to help out. We make our way over to the family crypt, and once inside, we begin the blood summoning. However, instead of coming into contact with Vladimir, we are instead greeted by the ghosts of almost the entire von Everich family that is buried there, and are left with no option but to kill them again. We ain't afraid of no ghosts though, and after dealing with them, we end up finding Vladimir.
My. Ornery whoresons those von Evericks, eh?
Who are you?
The rogue you seek. Vladimir von Everich, brother to Olgierd.
He tells us that he's not willing to sit there and watch other people enjoy themselves, and decides he's going to get his kicks by possessing us and using our body to have a good time instead. After being possessed by Vladimir, we then meet up with Shani, who had plans of going to a friend's wedding and needed a +1, which turned out to be perfect for us, as not only do we get to spend the night with a female, but we also needed to show Vladimir a good time, so with this we could knock out 2 birds with 1 stone. Once at the wedding, Vladimir takes over our body, nabs a change of clothes, and we enter the wedding. We then give our congratulations to the newly wedded couple, and now it was time to let the festivities commence, and there was quite a decent amount to take part in. Now, while only taking part in a few are actually required for the quest, there is actually a missable trophy for taking part in everything that we can at the party, and so with that we save a fire breather from a fearsome dog, play and lose a bunch of money in a game of Gwent, have a dance with Shani, chase some pigs and won Shani a prize, flirted with a random woman and then beat up her brothers, dived into a pond to get Shani's boot, had a little sit down with Shani as well as a sprinkling of other things, and met Gaunter Odim, who proceeded to absolutely shit on Vladimir.
Is that so? What do you know about me?
That you were ever the worst brother, that you envied Olgierd from your earliest days, and always wished to be just like him.
Rubbish. I never envied my brother.
Of course you did. He was a shining role model. Olgierd ran faster, shot truer, lifted greater weights. Olgierd learned to read first, although you tried your damnedest to beat him. As you grew up, he had his pick of girls, whereas you made do with the leftovers.
I apologize, Shani. I'm rather sorry you have to hear this.
Stop fooling yourself. Shani isn't here for you. She's here for Geralt. Even after death, you still play the pale imitation. Oh, by the way, Olgierd's a much better dancer.
You lying dog. That's my brother. I loved him.
Shani did, however, manage to cheer us up, and we proceeded on to the capping ceremony where Vladimir gives an absolutely spectacular speech.
Till now, I'd always considered peasant jollities unworthy of a gentleman. For tell me, who among you would rub shoulders with swineherds if born a noble? I delighted in the beauty of buxom farm wenches, of course, and indeed still do. Given more time, I'd prove this to each and every maiden here. Farmhands are a different story. Never took any note of them. Had one or two groom my mounts. They did this well, but were never worthy of conversation. Nay, not even if you paid me. For one must live by certain principles, am I right? But this day has changed all. Beneath the muck and dung, a peasant is a man. I understand this, thanks to you. You've still shite all to talk about, but I don't mind anymore. For this, I thank you, and say, you are well loved.
It's almost midnight. Time for the capping.
Wait, I'm not done.
Oh, yes, you are. All the maids join in the capping.
You're a maid too, Shani.
Even though he literally called them all peasants, they enjoyed the speech and he enjoyed his evening, in turn writing a letter to Olgierd confirming that he's had the time of his life. Or, well, afterlife. You get what I mean. Shortly after though, Odin makes another appearance and this time forces a reluctant Vladimir out of Geralt's body and back to the underworld, or wherever it is that spirits actually go, and then goes on to give us some relationship advice regarding Shani. This does however bring an end to the quest and we unlock the trophy, Let the Good Times Roll, for participating in every activity at the wedding. Turns out that with it being the end of the night and us having to move on to our next task at hand, Shani was a little bit upset, and so we decided to make some time for her by picking a flower and taking her for a ride on a boat, in more ways than one. Hey, it wouldn't be a Witcher storyline if Geralt didn't get lucky. The next morning, Shani gently shoots us down with the classic line of needing to sort everything out in her head, and so we return to Olgierd with the good news regarding his brother. And with that being the first wish granted, it was time to move on to the next wish, and that was to get our hands on Borsodi's house. Thankfully, we find out that the Borsodi's actually has an auction house, and we decided to pay it a visit in the hopes of being able to purchase the house or at least find out some more information regarding it. Once there, we come across our old friend Vim Vivaldi, who manages to get us into the auction, and after mingling with some of the other bidders who have attended, it was time for us to spend all of our money. Now, although we don't technically have to purchase anything here, there is a missable trophy that requires us to purchase everything in the auction, and thankfully we had a crap ton of money, so this wasn't an issue. We get our hands on a brass figurine from Count Romilly's collection, a canvas painting by the artist Van Rohe, basically a Van Gogh ripoff, and lastly a pair of unique glasses that once belonged to a famous assassin known as the Professor, which, funnily enough, just like Shani, we met in a previous game. After purchasing all three items, we get the trophy Shopaholic. After the auction, we actually run into Horst Borsodi, son of Maximilian, and we figure asking him about the house would probably get us some decent information. However, he doesn't like the fact that we even know about it and proceeds to get his guards to remove us from the auction house. Luckily for us though, once we get outside, we get introduced to a shady individual who claims that he can help us get our hands on Max Borsodi's house. Apparently, this house is locked away in the Borsodi vault, and that if we wanted the house, we would have to work together to get it. We then meet up with him a little while later, where he tells us that we are going to need to assemble a team to pull off this heist and gives us 3 individuals who are perfect for the job. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but just know we beat a guard in a game of Gwent to release a safecracker named Casimir, which we then recruited onto the team, and we performed at a travelling circus to gain the trust of Evelyn Gallo, who agreed to help us with the heist. We did also try to recruit a dwarf that was an expert in explosives, however, turns out he was very much dead and so wasn't able to help us. Once we had the team together though, it was time to start the heist. Although it wasn't really the smoothest of heists, as we do run into a bit of trouble with some of the guards, and we also end up losing Evelyn as she tells us that this isn't the kind of heat she signed up for and decided to leave early. Eventually though, we do manage to break into the vault, however we find Horst Borsodi waiting there for us. During this confrontation we learn that the mysterious stranger who asked us to help with the heist turned out to be Horst's brother Ewald Borsodi. It turns out that their father actually left the auction house to Ewald in his will, but because Ewald would typically squander any money he was given, Horst decided to cheat him out of his inheritance, leaving him poor, dishonoured and humiliated for years. At this point though, we then get to choose whether to side with Horst or Ewald. Now, they're both dickheads in their own right, but I decided to side with Ewald because Horst was the first one to be an a-hole towards us. We take down the guards, Ewald gets his long-awaited revenge, and now it was time to get our hands on Max Borsodi's house. Well, at least that's what we thought. Turns out the house actually contained his father's will, and Ewald wasn't prepared to give it up. We could just kill him to take the house and the will, but instead managed to come to an agreement by allowing him to keep the will as long as we get the container itself. Even though the will is in reality what Olgierd was truly after, he hasn't been the easiest to work with, and as he never stated he wanted the will, just that he wanted the house, we are going to give him exactly that. We then return the house to Olgierd, and of course he wasn't happy that the will wasn't inside. However, he does reveal the reason why he wanted it. Turns out that he and his family ran into a bit of debt long ago, and that Horst Borsodi took on the debt and demanded payment instantly. Of course, they wasn't able to do this, and so Horst evicted them from their family home and sold everything they had, from his father's sword all the way to his mother's death mask. To make things worse, when his lover Iris's parents found out about this, they instead forced her to marry the Ophiri prince, which is one of the reasons he had us kill the Frogman at the beginning of the DLC. Despite this, he did take a bit of comfort knowing that Horst's brother beat him to death with a candle holder. This did mean though that 2 of his 3 wishes were now complete, and he reveals his final wish to us. Of course, this was another near impossible wish, as he now wanted the violet rose he gifted to Iris back when they were in love. This was going to be near impossible, as not only do flowers typically wither away and turn to dust over time, but also because the house she lived in is in complete dismay, and there's a freaky no-faced caretaker that kills anyone who comes to the house. Can't lie, I actually had a nightmare when I first went through this DLC years ago, and he appeared in it. And just like my nightmare, this fight did not give me a fun time. He does drop a really sweet shovel though when we kill him, and I actually found myself using this quite a bit afterwards. After dealing with the caretaker, we are then introduced to a black cat and dog that actually has the ability to talk to us, although they claim they aren't animals and instead were friends of the house that came from far away. They do however tell us that Iris can be found in her bedroom and to take the caretaker's key to get access to the house. As we make our way through the house, we end up encountering and having to fight off a wraith, which we later find out is actually Iris. You see, Iris is dead. She died from grief and loneliness, all which filled her with rage in her later life, causing her to become a wraith, unable to move on from this world. The 2 shadow pets do tell us though that we will be able to contact Iris's spirit as long as we bury the body.
I didn't know Iris von Everec, so I can't say much about her. Fate had it a stranger now lays her remains in the grave. At times, fate muddles our path, and life turns toilsome, hard to bear. Yet all deserve respite and peace in death. Are interred. Let's summon her. Tormented spirit, I've laid your bones to rest. Forget your wrath, forget your grief. Show yourself.
After saying some nice words, Iris appears and although doesn't say much, does conjure up a painting that we find out takes us to a painted world. In order to get through this painted world and communicate with Iris, we must find, fix and experience Iris's memories, as well as destroy the fears that had tormented her all these years. During this section, there are also 2 missable trophies that we can unlock, with the first being to recreate all of Iris's nightmares. Thankfully, this isn't too hard to achieve, as most of these are story related, bar 1 or 2 memories that are completely optional. As we make our way through through the painted world, we learn more about Olgierd and Iris's relationship. After her parents tried to wed her off to the Etheri prince, he made his pact with Odin for all of the things that anyone would wish for. Never-ending life, wealth, power, all that jazz. And of course, all of this finally allowed him to marry Iris. However, this caused him to have a heart of stone and gradually led to him feeling less and less love towards her. This eventually led Iris to wanting a divorce, and obviously Olgierd didn't want to lose his wife. Eventually, Olgierd turned to black magic in an attempt to find a way to break the pact between him and Odin, although this proved to be completely pointless. Eventually, things got so bad that he even killed her father, of course causing her to harbour massive resentment towards him. In the end, he used the black magic to conjure up the caretaker and the two animals to keep Iris company, as he decided to leave her and gave her the violet rose to remember the good times they once shared. After experiencing all of these memories though, we do earn the trophy Curator of Nightmares. We wasn't done just yet, however, as now it was time to face and destroy all of Iris's nightmares, and I can't emphasize just how ridiculously hard this fight was on Death March difficulty. Each enemy does a ton of damage, and it is very easy to get overwhelmed in an unstoppable flurry of attacks from all of the nightmares. This took me over half an hour of constant retrying before I was finally able to beat the fight. This was made a whole lot more difficult due to the fact that I was going for another missable trophy that required us to wait for every single nightmare to start attacking us before being able to even deal a single bit of damage to any of them. Even though the process could be sped up by using our Ard sign to force them into fighting us early, it didn't make the fight any easier. In fact, it just made it harder. Eventually, after quite a few deaths though, we do manage to finally come out victorious, nabbing us the trophy when it's many against one. After defeating Iris's nightmares, we then meet the woman herself. After having a little conversation about her past with Olgierd, we explain to her that we need the rose, although in taking it, she and the world she had created after death may cease to exist.
Need to be honest, if I take the rose, you might cease to exist, as might the world you built around you.
And what will happen then? Shall I be free of the suffering, the sadness? Is it the void that awaits?
I don't know.
Thankfully, she agrees to give us the rose in the hopes of eventually finding the peace that she wants. And just before leaving Iris's world, the two shadow pets thank us for freeing them from her service and gives us some advice.
Beware of the one called the Man of Glass. Stand in his way and you'll meet a fate worse than death. Seek salvation in glass that can't be broken.
Glass that can't be broken?
So long.
Very cryptic, but I'm sure it will come in handy later. We then return to the tavern to find Olgierd's messenger, where we instead run into Odin.
Over here.
Oi, waiter looks. Use the look of a man who knows how to drink.
Thanks. Some other time.
Here now. Don't make me beg. My treat.
Show off.
Oh, and he can control time now apparently. Odin tells us that before the pact can be invoked and before our agreement can be fulfilled, we must first bring Olgierd to the Temple of Lilvani, and then he leaves and gives someone a parting gift. We then tell the messenger to inform Olgierd of where we need to meet Odin, and the messenger tells us that before we go, Shani wanted to meet with us. We meet with her where she reveals that the Redanian army is shipping her out to the front line in order to tend to the wounded, meaning that we were unlikely to see her again for quite some time. While we were busy with the other wishes though, Shani was doing some research on Olgierd, where she finds out that he had actually met with a professor of a local academy and asked him to do some research, which in the end turned him insane. Although he was insane, he was still alive, and so we decided to go and pay him a visit. Shani helps us one last time and assists us in gaining entrance to the academy, and after dealing with some witch hunters stationed inside, we make our way into the professor's house. We meet with the professor and he tells us that he had spent a long time going through countless tomes dating back thousands of years, which in the end them caused him to go blind, but he did learn that they all mentioned Odim, sometimes by name, sometimes by Master Mirror, and sometimes by Man of Glass, but he was always referred to as Evil Incarnate. He explains that Odim thrives on making pacts that his victims cannot fulfill, and in the end turns them insane. However, there was a way we could seemingly beat him, and that was to play him at his own game, although the price of doing so would cost us our soul should we lose. We then thank him for the information, and it turned out that we were the last person he'd ever speak to, as all of a sudden a wooden beam collapses above him, and as we try to save him, he steps back, slips on a bottle, and breaks his neck. At this point though, there was nothing else we could do, and so we head to the temple. Once there, we find Olgierd and give him the rose that he gave to Iris, fulfilling his final wish. All of a sudden though, Odim shows up and begins to take Olgierd's soul. While we could just let him take Olgierd's soul, we decide to intervene and instead challenge him to one of his games. If he wins, he gets to take both of our souls. If we win, both our pacts are fulfilled and he leaves us alone. And of course, he thinks we are going to fail, so he agrees, failing to remember that we had just fulfilled 3 seemingly impossible wishes. He then transports us to another world where we are given a ridiculously confusing riddle to solve within the time limit. As we explore, we find a mirror which seemingly appears to be the solution to the riddle. However, just as we were about to touch it, he breaks the ground beneath us. As we continue on, we do find more mirrors, but each one breaks as soon as we touch it. It wasn't looking good until we remembered what the Shadow Dog told us earlier: seek salvation in glass that cannot be broken. Now, because we are a smart boy, we realized that it didn't need to be glass, just something that can cast a reflection and can't be broken. And thankfully for us, there was a water fountain nearby that we were able to fill with water, and of course water casts reflections.
Be gone. You've lost.
So, any better?
Yeah, thanks. Wine's revived me a bit.
This plonk could revive a corpse. An exquisitely rank vintage. You know what, though? It's good at last to taste something real. So, have at it. Tell me what the blazes just happened. Your brand's gone. Guessing that's a good sign?
Odim decided to have some fun at my expense. Devised a game I was supposed to lose. Seems he'd forgotten the training you put me through in doing the undoable.
So only to protect myself. In doing so, I put you in harm's way. Forgive me.
Well, don't have to worry about him anymore. You're safe and free.
I thank you. Though I've no notion what to do with this freedom now. Mirror took everything. Everything I loved. All I held dear.
Not true. Got your heart back.
A bitter victory. Now at last I sense how much I've lost. I've a heart again. Yet all it feels is grief, sadness, and defeat. My life is a ruin.
You've handled tougher situations. You'll figure this one out. Got a company of faithful comrades waiting. Got a home, your fortune.
No. I cannot live as I did before.
So what'll you do?
I don't know. But one thing's clear. It's time I took fate into my own hands. Lived life anew. And truly, this time.
Sounds like a plan.
I'll never forget what you did for me, Witcher. I have something for you.
Can't accept this.
You can, and must. This sabre's been in my family for generations. Even when I'd lost all else, it remained at my side. Means a great deal to me.
All the more reason why I can't take it.
Do me the honor. This'll mark the start of my new life. And such a weapon could be right useful to you.
Thank you.
Ow!
Sorry.
You needn't be. I thank you again, Geralt. And good luck on the path.
Good luck to you too.
And with that being the Hearts of Stone storyline completed, we unlock the trophy Pacta Sunt Servanda, or something along those lines anyway. With the storyline now complete though, we can move on to the DLC's cleanup stage in order to obtain our final 5 trophies of the Hearts of Stone DLC. Throughout most of the stage, my focus was on these 2 trophies. One for collecting all available Aetheri armor, horse gear and at least 1 sword, and the other for defeating all of the fallen knights and looting their campsites. To get the Aetheri equipment, we began by finding an Aetheri merchant who we challenged to and beat in a race, in which he rewards us with an Aetheri saddle for Roach, and we also purchased the Aetheri saddlebags and blinders from him, knocking out 1 set of equipment that we need. He also had a sword and tunic for us to buy, but we didn't need to as we already had some Aetheri gear from all of the looting we did throughout the DLC. He then tells us that on his way here he was attacked by some bandits who had made off with the diagrams he needed to craft Aetheri armor, and that if we can get them back, he can give us a copy of the diagrams so that we can have them crafted ourselves. This involves us making our way around to numerous bandit camps, taking out the bandits and looting all of the goodies inside until we find each of the diagrams we needed. After returning them to him, he gives us the copies of the diagrams and we can now craft the remaining gear that we need, which turned out to be just 1 piece, the gauntlets, and doing so rewarded us with the trophy I wore Aetheri before it was cool. Now I'm going to be completely honest, I'm not sure if this was bugged and unlocked early or whether this was intentional. As I said, I had picked up a good amount of Aetheri gear during my looting escapades, and the only piece of gear I didn't pick up outside of the horse gear was the gauntlets. I was under the impression that all of the gear had to have been purchased from the merchant or crafted, as a quick look online seemed to conclude that that was the way to get this trophy, but apparently this is not the case, meaning if you're lucky enough to loot Aetheri armor for all of the armor slots and an Aetheri weapon throughout your time playing, then the only pieces of gear you would need to purchase would be the horse armor, as this can only actually be obtained from the merchant. Don't take my word for it though, as again, this could have just bugged out and gave me it early, but it's definitely worth seeing if you can save on materials and money if you have a bunch of the gear already. The second trophy was very much like the one we just done, but instead of heading to bandit camps in search of diagrams, we just needed to head to each of the new fallen knight camps to take out the knights and loot the area. Thankfully, this didn't take me too long, and it wasn't long before we got another trophy, Wild Rose Dethorned. And while making progress towards these 2 trophies, I also unlocked the trophy I can quit anytime I want for being under the influence of 7 potions or decotions at the same time. The next trophy I unlocked required me to equip the skill Arrow Deflection and then use our parry to deflect arrows back at our opponents to kill them, and after doing this a total of 3 times, we nabbed the trophy Return to Sender, which leaves us our final trophy of the DLC, and that was the trophy Rad Steesbro, which required us to slide downhill uninterrupted for at least 10 seconds. Thankfully, there is a mountain in Skellige that makes this so much easier to obtain, and after a couple of tries, we managed to nab our final trophy of the DLC. And with that being the final trophy, this now means we have completed our first DLC and 100%ed its trophy list, meaning that we can now move on to our second and final DLC, that being Blood and Wine. The DLC begins with us meeting up with some old knight friends from Toussaint, those being Milton and Palmerin. We help them defend a local village from a bandit attack, and then they reveal that they have a message for us from the Duchess of Toussaint. There is currently a beast terrorizing Toussaint, and the Duchess has requested our help in finding and taking down the beast before it can claim any more victims. Of course, we agree to help and then begin to make our journey over to Toussaint.
Toussaint, the land of love and wine.
Exactly how I remembered it.
You will find Beauclair's changed some these past years.
Walk about when you have the chance. You will see for yourself.
To me, place always seemed straight out of a fairy tale. Knights errant, elven palaces.
Once we arrive though, we witness a Goliath causing absolute mayhem, and so we decide to step in and lend a hand in bringing it down. And it's here we get our very first trophy of the DLC for arriving in Toussaint. Now, while we could fight the Goliath with our sword, it would take quite some time to bring him down, but thankfully there is a quicker way to deal with him, and this way also rewards us with a missable trophy. And all we have to do is use our crossbow to shoot him in the eye, instantly bringing him down and unlocking our second trophy of the DLC, David and Goliath. After dealing with the Goliath, Milton takes us to where a body left by the beast was found, and we go to do some investigating. We didn't find much, but we did find a bloodied handkerchief with the letters DLC stitched into it, which turned out to be Delacroix, a close friend of Milton's. We then head to a nearby tavern to ask some of the locals if they saw where the body was taken after its discovery, and we get pointed towards the Corvo Blanco vineyard. At the vineyard, we track the body's whereabouts to the cellar, and inside we find a Bruxa tucking into the dead man's corpse. Of course, she has no intention of letting us leave, and we have no intention of letting her live, so we got down to business. After dealing with the Bruxa, we investigate the corpse, where we discover that the beast is likely intelligent and not your typical monster, and we also find a hand that is still moving, which even baffles Geralt, and after what he's been through, I'd assume that would take a lot to do. At this point though, we are still no closer to solving what this beast actually is or why it's going around murdering people, and so we decide to go and meet with the Duchess at the tourney. Our chat with the Duchess would have to wait though, as once there we find a battle about to commence in the arena, and before it even gets underway, we can smell trouble.
Someone's gonna fight a Shalmar with some bells on its tail to confuse it, slow it down.
Whatever is the problem? The beast is a gift from the Emperor, no less.
This is dangerous. Bells on its tail aren't enough.
I saw a spectacle of the swords at the arena in Nuremberg. There, a knight defeated a Shalmar with bells on its tail.
Might have gotten lucky. Shalmar might have been lame. Who knows? Only a Witcher has a real chance against a healthy Shalmar, and that's not even every Witcher. Besides which, releasing a monster that dangerous in front of a crowd, plain irresponsible.
You tell him, Geralt. Anyway, as you probably guessed, things in the fight didn't go to plan. The Shalmar breaks loose, sends a knight flying, and we have to jump in and save the day. After dealing with the Shalmar, we find and speak to the Duchess and asked her about any information she can give us regarding the contract. And she takes us to meet with a man called Damien, captain of the guards, who has said information. After discussing the previous victims of the beast, we discover that each of them were older knights that were killed under extraordinary circumstances, and that they were likely murdered to denounce the 5 chivalric virtues that each knight pledges loyalty to, and these 3 victims just so happened to be knights that wasn't exactly models of these virtues, and that they were once part of a team. With the 4th virtue being valour, we come to conclude that Milton may in fact be the 4th target, as he was also a part of this team, and so we now needed to find him. But first...
Your Grace!
Geralt, you are one dirty dog. Finding Milton was going to be easier said than done though, as there was currently an event going on in the palace gardens where participants must find 3 different items: a unicorn's horn, a golden fish, and a phoenix egg, and having all 3 will allow players to work out where the hare hides, which just so happens to be Milton dressed up as a rabbit. And so with that, while we worked on getting the unicorn horn and the golden fish, the Duchess worked on getting the phoenix egg. Once all 3 items were in our possession, we end up coming to the conclusion that Milton is hiding in a greenhouse. However, upon getting there, we realise we are too too late. Milton had already been killed by the beast, and so we instantly give chase until we eventually come face to face with it and realise it is a higher vampire.
What was that? I'm here.
This belonged to you, maybe?
It did, but you may keep it. I've a new one. I do not know you. I've done you no harm. Yet first you butchered a Bruxer who was dear to me. Now you pursue me. Why?
You've killed 4 innocent people, at least.
And you? How many innocents have you cut down?
Not here to talk about me.
Yet that is exactly what we are doing. So, did they send you after me? Who are they?
What do you mean, they? Duchess hired me. You've been murdering her subjects.
Is it as simple as that? I would ask you to convey to the Duchess that I've but one victim left, but you'll not get the chance. You were to stay where you were. Regenerate!
I know you're in trouble. I can help.
I'll help myself!
No, he's my friend.
Thankfully, we were saved by another higher vampire, and we actually knew this one. This was Regis, and he tells us that the vampire currently on a murder spree was called Dettlaff. Regis tells us that him and Dettlaff are blood brothers due to Dettlaff helping him regenerate some time ago, and that he knows killing for the sake of killing isn't like him, and that there must be a good reason behind it. Either that, or something or someone has seriously upset him, although he doesn't actually know what the reason could be, and has come to Toussaint to try and show him the error of his ways. As we both have a common cause though, we decide to work together, and he tells us to meet up with him at a local cemetery. As we make our way there though, we get delivered a letter from Yennefer where she tells us that she has been doing a bit of research and stumbled upon information regarding a professor named Moreau, who was a scholar that conducted research into Witcher mutations and suggests it may be worth looking into. After a bit of investigating, we end up stumbling across a hidden laboratory where we find out that this professor was actually trying to reverse the Witcher mutations that his son had underwent many years prior. However, the experiments failed and only ended up making the mutations stronger than what they already were. With this, he accepted the fact that his son couldn't be cured and decided to give up his efforts. He did, however, though, leave everything he used in his experiments at the lab, as well as instructions on how to conduct them. And so we thought, hey, we're a Witcher, and having stronger mutations can only be a good thing. And so we got to work with gathering the necessary tools and ingredients needed. Eventually, this ends up in us stepping inside some kind of Iron Maiden looking device where we undergo the same treatment he had previously given to his son. This now gives us the ability to craft strong mutations, provided we have the skill points and mutagens needed. Thankfully we did, and crafting our very first one nabs us the trophy, Weapon W. Before continuing on with the main story, I also decided to get another side quest line out of the way as well as another missable trophy. This has us meeting with a knight named Guillaume, who was the one that was actually injured by the Shelmar earlier on. He tells us that he believes Vivian, the lady in waiting to the Duchess, has been afflicted by a curse. The reason he believes this is that one moment she seemed to be really fond of him and the next she screamed and ran off. Since that encounter she had been avoiding him, however she has been visiting a pool by a nearby glade late at night and often is never seen after dusk. Now this could be nothing and she just may not be interested in the poor fellow, but nevertheless we agree to help. Guillaume wants us to take his place in the tourney and win so that we will be able to meet with her at the end and see what's going on. This is where the missable trophy comes in. While we don't need to come first in every single event in order to win the tourney, we do have to come first in all of them in order to get the trophy. Thankfully though, this isn't terribly difficult to achieve. We take part and come first in an archery match, and we come first place in a horse race too. This however already brings us to the end of the first day of the tourney and we couldn't continue it until the following day. So we take this time to do a bit of investigating. While we believe from a bit of evidence we found earlier that Vivian could be a Bruxa, a form of vampire, we don't have any concrete evidence. We follow her into her tent to confront her on our suspicions, however she wasn't in her tent and all we end up finding is a bird. Not really sure where she could have vanished to, but we decide to follow the bird into the woods as it seems to give us the kind of idea that it wants us to follow it. We end up finding Vivian, however turns out she wasn't a Bruxa and was instead some kind of human-bird hybrid. At first she thought we were there to kill her for a contract, however we assure her that we are actually here to help. She reveals to us that she is in fact cursed. When her mother was pregnant, her parents would spend a lot of time in this wood admiring the birds. One day though, a creature appeared and told her parents that they had no right to delight themselves in something that wasn't theirs and ordered them to give them something. However, they had nothing to give it, and so the creature decided to claim their unborn daughter Vivian as its own. When she was born, at first everything was normal. However, 15 years later, symptoms of this curse began to arise and has since continued to advance. It began only affecting her at moonlight, but now affects her during the day, causing her to have to use magic ointment to make her look normal. We tell her that even though her curse is far more complicated as it happened before birth, we could try to remove it, and we give her two options. One is to transfer the curse onto someone else. This is the safest option and the curse would likely have a much weaker hold on the new host. And the second is to perform an ancient ritual using a bird egg. However, the consequences could be serious, leaving her with the average lifespan of an Oriole 7 years. Even though she's very much against the first idea, she agrees to think about our solutions to the problem. We also learn that this pool is a source of powerful magic as she uses it to briefly reverse the transformation, something which could come in handy later. We return to the tourney camp, and even though we agreed to Vivian we wouldn't tell anyone, we decide to tell Guillaume. Thankfully, this doesn't change his feelings towards her, and he is even willing to take on the curse so that she may live free. That's enough for one night though, and this brings us on to our final day of the tourney and our last few events. The first event involved us becoming part of a team in a skirmish against another team, which we managed to win without any issues and even took down the most knights. And the last event had us facing off against the victor of last year's tourney, Gregoire de Gorgon. An extremely easy fight considering his attacks were actually really damn slow. Anyway, we win our final event and earn the trophy, a night to remember. We get crowned the champion, get given a sweet sword, and then finally get to help Vivian with her curse. She tells us that she wishes no one else to bear the curse and decides to use the method that results in her shortening her life. Guillaume then makes an appearance and tells her that he wishes to bear the curse for her because he loves her. She still isn't going to make up her mind though, and instead leaves us with the ultimate decision, and so we decide to try and lift the curse from Vivian and lay it on Guillaume, as again this is the safest option.
Shut your eyes, both of you, and don't move.
Guillaume,
Yes, my love?
if you become as I am now, I wish you to know I shall not leave you.
Picture yourselves reflected in a pool of water. Focus on that. Now, open your eyes. Damn, I think it might have worked. How do you feel? In general, you feel it change, Guillaume?
I was struck hard, as if by a battering ram, but now I feel not at all different. Apart from a slight itch on my skin. Are you certain it worked?
Yes, something happened, definitely. Must be an intersection beneath this pond. Powerful magic at work here. Look at Vivian.
What now?
Now? Now you get to live together. Happily ever after. Still, watch yourselves carefully. Notice any troubling symptoms, find me.
Naturally. I thank you, Garrett. Oh, and your payment.
At last! I've so much to make up for. Balls to attend, distant lands to see.
Free at last, as a bird.
Ha! I find you droll. I had not noticed before.
But you will not fly away without me.
That remains to be seen, I think. But I too must thank you, Witcher.
Don't mention it. You take care, both.
This brings an end to the quest, and although we don't earn another trophy, we did help them both find happiness. At this point, I decided to continue on with the main quest, and so we headed over to the cemetery to meet Regis in the crypt. Once there, we show him the hand we found, which he reveals to be Dettlaff's, and that we can use that to experience some of his memories and potentially find out where Dettlaff is hiding. The plan is to use his tissue to brew a potion, however a few more ingredients are needed first. The first ingredient was white saliva, and thankfully Regis's ravens were able to locate one. This takes us to a cursed house, and upon arriving we find the words, "None shall sit at your table, no spoon you have shall sate you, and never again shall you wish to spy your reflection in the mirror."
Sounds like a curse, all right.
Inside the house we find that the White has an unhealthy obsession with spoons, but we do find a few diaries that point towards the White once being a person that had been cursed many years ago. While we could just wait for the creature to appear and kill it for its glands, we decide to try our best to remove the curse instead.
Not gonna hurt you. Wanna help? I've seen the words of the curse on the walls. Think I know how to lift it. Tried to bring folk here, convince them to sit at the table with you, right? Well, I'm gonna be your guest now. Your willing guest. Just need a bit for Regis. And now we'll tend to you. We can't use spoons. No, that won't work. You've been looking for a spoon that would feed you, but there's no such spoon. We need to eat without spoons. Likeness.
We end up retrieving the saliva we needed, and we also end up finding the now uncursed woman, which we decide to bring back to Corvo Blanco, which was the vineyard gifted to us by the Duchess as payment for taking on the contract. After returning the first ingredient to Regis, he then reveals one more is needed, and that is the blood of another higher vampire, although simply taking some of his blood wouldn't cut it. We would only be able to use the blood of a higher vampire once it was in an enraged state, and that could prove to be extremely dangerous even for us. Regis tells us that in order to get his blood we must travel to an ancient vampire estate named Teshem Mutner, lock him up in one of the cages, and then kill multiple beasts around him. The blood spilled would eventually cause him to become enraged, allowing us to then take some of what we need for the potion. Not the safest option, but at this point it is our only option, and so we set off for Teshem Mutner. One thing before we leave though.
As things stand, the die is cast. High time we set off for Teshem Mutner. My head's spinning already, and you're starting to smell quite tasty.
And you're starting to scare me.
Once at Teshem Mutner, we find the cages, lock Regis inside, and get to killing until eventually he is enraged enough that he has undergone the change. Can't lie, this is a very long fight, and again, as I am on Death March difficulty, enemies just hit much harder than I would like them to. I did die quite a few times, but eventually we were successful. We then take a sample of Regis's blood and wait a few hours with him until the blood dries off and his transformation wears off. Once it does though, we travel back to the crypt and finish off brewing the potion, and once it was finished we then used it to experience Detlaf's memories. Turns out Detlaf met the third victim, Delacroix, at a bootblack stand and actually became pretty good friends with him. However, one day was given orders to kill him. After performing the deed, Detlaf was so upset with what he had just done that he ended up cutting off his own hand, which was actually the one that we managed to find. And seeing as the bootblack stand seemed to be a place that Detlaf frequented, we decided to head over there to see if we could find any more information. Before doing that though, I decided to take on another side quest that can reward us with another missable trophy. This had us heading over to an island where we find a small lake that we can actually walk on, as well as a hermit sitting in the middle of it. The hermit tells us that he guards a most wondrous sword that lies in the water, and that only one possessing the 5 chivalric virtues may retrieve it. Luckily for me, I had managed to prove myself worthy of the 5 chivalric virtues throughout my time so far in the DLC, and so one last task lies ahead before being able to take the sword. We now needed to beat the hermit in combat. As you can probably tell, this wasn't any normal hermit, but we also aren't any normal man. Thankfully the fight was pretty easy, and upon besting him in combat, the Lady of the Lake, someone who we had met before, rises her hand out of the water, rewarding us with the Erendite sword, and upon taking the sword, we are rewarded with the trophy embodiment of the 5 virtues. At this point I also decided to get another side quest, or in this case chain of side quests, out of the way for another missable trophy. I'm not going to go into any extraordinary amounts of detail here, but just know that this quest is quite in depth, and certain things must be done in certain ways to get the ending we want and the trophy. Basically, the owners of 2 vineyards are at war because each of them want to buy the Belgard vineyard, however are both unable to do so as they have been experiencing major issues with their own, most notably beast infestations, missing wine and missing workers. They both think the other is to blame for what's going on and both ask for our assistance in the matter. We end up helping both owners sort out their troubles at their vineyards, and even come to find out that neither of them are actually at fault for their problems, and that they were actually both being sabotaged by one Count Crespi. After showing them the evidence that neither of them are to blame for each other's misfortunes, they decide to put their differences aside and purchase the vineyard together. And after returning a few days later, they tell us that they want to show their gratitude by naming a wine after us, which we of course choose to call the White Wolf, bringing an end to the questline and earning us the trophy, the Grapes of Wrath Stomped. With another 2 missable trophies out of the way, it was time to carry on with the main story. We head over to the bootblack stand where we find him in a bit of trouble with a few of the locals. They wanted to give him a good hiding, but of course we're not going to let them do that, and we gave them a good hiding instead. Surely if he has any information now, we should get it for free, right? Well, that's where you'd be wrong. He wanted coin, and no small amount either. This little man wanted 500 crowns to expand his business, which is absolutely bonkers. Like, what could he possibly do with 500 crowns? We could have haggled him lower, and we could have even used our Witcher abilities to avoid paying. However, we had more than enough money by this point, so I just thought, screw it, take my money and give me the information I need. Turns out though, the information he had on Detlaf was absolutely useless and just told us that he came to him often. That was until Regis showed up and offered him a concoction that could really help his shoe cleaning business. This changed his mind pretty damn quickly, and all of a sudden he had a lot more information, and he reveals that Detlaf often often has him leave his shoes at a nearby house with a red door, and so we decide to go over and check it out. Once inside, we find a letter indicating that Dettlaff was in fact being blackmailed and wasn't killing just for funsies. The blackmailer claimed to have kidnapped the love of his life, and that if he didn't perform the killings, then she would be offed instead. We also find a number of other notes with the names of each of the victims written on them in Nazari ink, except we notice one of them is stained with wine, which may come in handy shortly. At this point, we figure out that if we were able to find the blackmailers and save Dettlaff's love, then we may just be able to stop him peacefully. We, however, needed to go and report on our hunt for Dettlaff to the Duchess, and Regis tells us that he will convince him that we are trying to help and to not kill anyone anymore for the time being. We meet with the Duchess and tell her what we have learned so far. The beast is a higher vampire that not even all of her strongest knights would be able to beat, and that the reason for the killings is that he is being blackmailed. We also tell her of the notes that we found and that one of them has a wine stain on it, and she immediately calls for the ducal sommelier. Turns out this man's nose is better than a dog's, as just from a sniff of spilt wine, he is able to determine that the wine is a Sangreal 1269 vintage, a wine that is exclusively made for the ducal table and produced at the Castel Ravello vineyard. And so we decide to take a ride out to the vineyard with the Duchess in order to find out if any wine had been stolen. Once there, we check out the wine cellar, where we find out that even though the barrels were full, one of these barrels was not ducal wine. We then confronted the winemaker on the issue, where he admits to selling one of the barrels to a Cintrian noble who offered him a price too good to turn down. He also reveals that they wanted another shipment of wine and that it was due to be delivered tonight. And so with that, Fabricio gets sent to the dungeons for treason, and we head out with Damien and some soldiers to ambush the buyers. We ambush the men waiting to receive the barrel and even manage to capture one alive. Although he didn't know a lot, he did confirm that he worked for the Cintrian, at this point making this mysterious noble our prime suspect. With the Cintrian being our only real lead at this point and a strong likelihood he could even be the blackmailer, or at least working with the blackmailer, we decide finding the Cintrian may give us the answers we are looking for. A little while later, Damien returns with some valuable information. Him and his men found out that a beggar and a waitress actually had a brief run-in with the nobleman, and that he was last seen with the singer Cecilia Belante. Upon heading to her house though, Cecilia was nowhere to be found, but a chambermaid did tell him that she was to meet with the Cintrian tonight to attend a fancy party hosted by an exclusive club called the Mandragora, and of course we are now going to attend this party with the Duchess. So with that, we get dressed up in something smart and meet up with the Duchess, where we then attend the party. Just because we are here on business though doesn't mean we can't have a bit of fun, and of course take part in some of the party's entertainments as well as down a couple of drinks. We end up following some clues with the hopes of finding Cecilia and the Cintrian, however come to find that Cecilia had just been murdered. We follow the killer's tracks, however come to find that he has actually fallen out of a window after fighting with someone else while trying to steal some jewellery. We then meet with the party's host Oriana, where she reveals that she was the one who pushed the Cintrian out of the window after catching him trying to steal her jewellery, specifically the Heart of Toussaint, an heirloom that had been in the royal family for years until one day it disappeared, never to be seen again. We also discover that the Cintrian was sent here on a job with instructions on what to look for, with the only real evidence giving us a lead being the dagger he used to murder Cecilia and attack Oriana. The dagger had a crest engraved in its hilt, and that this crest was used by the Lords of Duntine. Oriana then steps away, and the Duchess has a revelation. She believes that her sister Siana might actually be one of the ones responsible. You see, their parents banished her from the duchy when they were children, as they believe she was cursed and has not been seen since. She comes to this conclusion because of the wine and the Heart of Toussaint. Regardless of this though, if she is involved, she requests that we find Siana and bring her back unharmed. Oriana then returns with Regis and Dettlaff. Apparently she has known Regis for a long time, and for some reason Regis thought it was a good idea to bring Dettlaff along. While talking, we cryptically come to an understanding with each other, and while him and Regis stay put, we go to Duntine in the hopes of finding the blackmailer, Siana, and Dettlaff's love interest, Reyna. We meet up with Damien and his knights, where we go over the plan and then launch an attack on Duntine. We fight through the men guarding the settlement, and while inside manage to find Dettlaff's love, Reyna.
Are you hurt? If any of them.
You know me. I'd never let them hurt me. I just waited for you to come.
Happily ever after for these two, right? Wrong. The thing is, Rena is actually Sienna, and Sienna was actually the one blackmailing Dettlaff. This of course pisses off Dettlaff immensely and gives Sienna 3 days to go to Tesha Mutna to explain, and if she doesn't, he will raze Beauclair to the ground. Sienna tells us that she wants to meet with Dettlaff, but once outside she gets escorted to the palace by the Duchess's knights. We tell her that Sienna was the one responsible for the whole thing, and of course the Duchess is furious with our accusations and refuses to even believe it's true. We later meet with the Duchess where she tells us that even though literally everyone in Beauclair believes Sienna should pay for her actions, she refuses to let any harm come to her and demands that we bring her Dettlaff's head. All of a sudden though, we discover Dettlaff is running out of patience and has sent a massive army of vampires to attack the city. This leaves us with two choices. We can either summon an ancient and extremely powerful vampire that can force Dettlaff to appear, although doing this is extremely dangerous, or we can find Sienna and bring her to meet with Dettlaff in the hopes that she can talk him out of it. Although that itself is not a guarantee, and there's always a chance that he will kill her as well. We decided to try and end things as peacefully as possible and set out to find where Sienna is being held. We fight through the city, taking out as many vampires as we can, and eventually we find Damien that tells us Sienna is being held at the palace playroom. We make our way over there and head inside, however Sienna isn't here. We do find a journal written by their old court governess though that reveals Sienna had a troubled childhood and was always painted as the black sheep. Not only that, but there was also something else pretty damn interesting.
Girls for the first time to the land of 1,000 fables. We spent half the day there. First we played with Thumbelina, then with Barbarossa, who proved quite the charmer for a brigand and pirate.
I'm beginning to suspect Isabel de Roquefort wrote in her diary after taking a powerful hallucinogenic. Cannabis rudelaris, for instance, or...
Shh, don't interrupt. I tip my cap to Master Artorius Vigo for his achievement. He has proved he has no equal in the arcane arts.
Wait, Artorius was the court mage here, a specialist in illusions, which means...
Regis, last warning. Stop interrupting or I'll seat you in the corner. The girls told me if I ever wish to visit alone, I need but crack open the land of 1,000 fables and utter out loud the incantation Expecto Ludum.
A book as the key to an illusion. My, this grows more interesting by the minute.
We find the book, utter the magical words, and are taken to the land of 1,000 fables.
Expecto Ludum. Regis? Regis! Land of 1,000 fables. Incredible. Let's see where this road takes me.
Once inside, we follow the yellow brick road until we eventually encounter the Wicked Witch trying to cook Jack from Jack and the Beanstalk and Sienna trying to save him. And seeing as we weren't supposed to be here, we were next on the witch's menu. Thankfully, the fight wasn't too difficult and we managed to take her down and then save Jack. Sienna tells Jack that she wants his beans, but unfortunately he doesn't have them. You see, when Sienna was brought here, the Duchess ordered to have the beans hidden in the land of 1,000 fables, and the only way out is to use those beans to grow the giant beanstalk and then take out the giant guarding the portal at the top of it. We also find out that the reason the fairy tales are turning evil and trying to kill us is because the book requires maintenance in order to keep things in check. Without this maintenance, the spell starts to degrade, taking the whole illusion with it and causing its inhabitants to grow wild. And Sienna also reveals her reasons behind wanting the knights killed. You see, when she was escorted beyond the duchy's borders, one of the knights beat her unconscious and others deprived her of food and abused her. And I can't lie, now she doesn't actually seem so bad for wanting them dead. Anyway, now was not the time to be talking about the past, it was time to hunt down those beans. We question and threaten the boy who cried wolf over where the beans were taken. We find out the three bears had killed Goldilocks. We kill the big bad wolf from Little Red Riding Hood to get our first bean, which I must say I found absolutely hilarious.
Sienna can take her place.
What? Very well. It's not as if I can forbid you. Granddaughter, come closer, sweetie.
But, Grandmama, what
big eyes you have.
The better to see you with, my dear.
Granny, what big arms you have.
The better to embrace you with, my dear.
And Grandmama, what big teeth you have. Eh?
The better to eat you with, my dear.
We kill the 3 little pigs and take their bean, and we kill Longnox's ghost after she hung herself with her own hair to get our hands on the 3rd bean. While going after the beans, Sienna tells us how she came to meet Dettlaff and why she left him. One day she was at a fence trying to sell some goods when Dettlaff walked in holding a silver candlestick through a cloth. This piqued her curiosity, and so she decided to follow him. He caught on though and decided to try and scare her off. However, when she didn't get scared, it threw him back a little. They talked and even met up a few times until eventually Dettlaff became infatuated with her. She liked it at first, but she realised that he didn't love like a normal man and more like an animal. Madly, deeply and unconditionally, and being as emotionally damaged as she was, she found it hard to return those same feelings, and so decided that it was best to leave. It was only when she returned to Beauclair that she remembered him and decided to use him. Before continuing on with the main quest, I decided to take on a few of the different side quests that can also be found here. I'm not going to go into any detail on them, just know that they were really enjoyable. In fact, this whole fairy tale world is enjoyable, something which you honestly wouldn't expect out of a Witcher game, but something I am so glad they included. It is truly a unique experience. It almost kind of gives me Fable vibes. If any of you have played Fable, it gives me those kind of vibes. Continuing on with the main story, we finally meet the girl who sells flint that now sells drugs and realise she is in possession of a ribbon that was originally given to Sienna by Artorius Vigo to protect her from evil, and so we decided to play her in a game of Gwent for it, which we of course win, getting the ribbon back for Sienna. Something that doesn't seem important now but plays a big role a little while later. Continuing on, we plant the beans, climb the giant beanstalk that came out of those beans, and then fight and kill the very Dark Souls inspired cloud giant awaiting us at the top. In fact, there's even a Dark Souls reference here which only kind of alludes to the fact more that this is supposed to be like very Dark Souls inspired. Before leaving this fairy tale though, Sienna has one last wish, and that is to bang Geralt. No shit, she actually wants to. She has no idea what awaits her once she leaves the fairy tale, and this may be her last chance. And of course, who are we to say no? What's hilarious is that all of this is happening while the city of Beauclair is getting absolutely devoured by vampires. And she's the Duchess's sister, who also happens to be our employer. Like, damn Geralt, you really are one dirty dog. After getting it on with Sienna though, we enter the portal, returning to Beauclair, where we then meet back up with Regis and head to Tesha Mutna to meet with Dettlaff. Sienna tries to talk to him, but he's having none of it and just straight up kills her, or at least he attempted to. Turns out the ribbon saved her life and returned her back to the land of 1,000 fables. At this point, Dettlaff is now completely pissed and comes at us claws out. Regis comes to our rescue though, and we get treated to a sweet vampire fight. Unfortunately, Regis doesn't take the opportunity to kill him, instead attempting to show him mercy, which was his downfall as he then gets launched into a wall, knocking him out and getting him trapped beneath the rubble, which now leaves us to fight Dettlaff on our own. The beginning of the fight was going well, until...
Any gods, start praying now.
Yep, Dettlaff reveals his true final form. Can't lie, at this point we were well and truly fucked. This fight in Deathmarch is honestly a nightmare, which led us to dying more times than I can count and having to go through the same cutscene over and over again each time we did, because it's not really skippable. You can skip the talking, don't get me wrong, but you can't actually just skip the cutscene entirely. Not giving up though, we eventually managed to cut off Dettlaff's wings, preventing him from flying around. However, in return, he decides to give us a little taste. This sends us into some kind of hallucination where we then have to destroy some sort of growths, as well as avoid some kind of blood monster version of Dettlaff. Thankfully, we were able to do enough damage to dispel the illusion, giving us the chance to put a stop to Dettlaff.
Leave him to me. Be gone.
I can't let...
I insist.
A few weeks later, we find ourselves dressing like a twit for an upcoming honour for helping Toussaint. Before going to receive our honour though, me and Regis come to realise that there are 5 virtues, yet only 4 murders, so we decide to do a bit of investigating. After speaking to the bootblack once more and beat up some guys who have problems with homeless people, we then visit the homeless shelter where it turns out that one of the men here was meant to deliver the final target's name, and upon reading it, we find out that Sienna intended for her sister to be the final murder. We decide to go and talk to Sienna, where she reveals that she wanted her sister to be murdered because she turned her back on her when she was a child. But we do bring up a pretty valid point. When Sienna was exiled, they were like 12 years old. There is literally no way she could have done anything to help. After speaking to Sienna though, we meet up with the Duchess and we are awarded with the Order of Vitis Vinifera, Toussaint's highest honour, and unlock the trophy Last Action Hero.
Step forth.
We bestow the distinction upon the Witcher, who saved Beauclair from the terrible beast. Such is our desire. May the symbol serve as a reminder to all that the Witcher shall forever remain a friend of Beauclair.
We then reveal Sienna's intentions to murder the Duchess and she is summoned to the court. They have a bit of a squabble but also a bit of a heart-to-heart. In the end though, they end up forgiving each other for the past and what's happened, and even have a little hug to bring things to an end. Later that evening we meet back up with Regis to have a little catch-up. That is until we are jumped by some vampires. This causes Regis to decide that he is going to have to leave Beauclair and retire somewhere a bit less vampire heavy, as he had violated a sacred vampire code, and as long as he sticks around, they will continue to try and hunt him. But before he leaves, we have a little drink to celebrate our success, bringing an end to the Blood and Wine DLC.
Interesting point of view. I so don't feel like going anywhere. Sit here a while longer?
So we shall, my friend. We have witnessed, and in fact on several occasions incited, many great and weighty events. After all that toil, I believe we deserve a bit of a rest.
That we do.
Well, sort of an end. We do get one more cutscene after the credits roll where we find that Yennefer has actually come to stay at our vineyard and spend some quality time with us. But then that's it. That is 100% the end of the Blood and Wine story, well, at least the good ending anyway, and now we can turn our focus onto the cleanup, with our first cleanup trophy being to get the bad ending of Blood and Wine. We're not going to go through the whole story again, don't worry. To get this, I just reloaded to a previous save that took us back into the land of 1,000 fables, only this time I didn't get the magic ribbon back from the Flint girl for Sienna, and when meeting up with Dettlaff, he finally gets his revenge and kills Sienna. For realsies this time.
Did you truly feign it all? That which bound us was a ruse?
Dettlaff, it's not that simple.
Oh no, it's very simple. You either deceived me or not. In forgiving you, I grieve. For now, we must part. A shame.
Sienna!
What I had to do. What she deserved. Beauclair will know peace once more. The vampires will have left the city by dawn. I shall leave as well. Go far away, far from men. You can try to stand in my way. Then I shall kill you both. Though that is not at all my will. The decision is yours.
You can go, but if ever we meet again...
I shall keep my distance, believe me. Geralt, Regis, farewell.
I'm sorry. I swore to protect her, I know, but it happened so fast. What have we done?
Let a killer walk. Isn't that what you wanted from the start, though? We have to let Anna Henrietta know.
Geralt, you will face...
I know. All the same, we have to inform her.
Of course, the Duchess was absolutely furious with this and sends us to prison, earning us the trophy King of the Clink. And for those of you who are interested in what happens next, we end up getting into a couple of fights in prison, make friends with a rat called Stefan, and get sentenced, but not to death. Turns out our case was taken to court, and although it didn't look good, we had a friend from far away who was looking out for us.
What are you talking about? What man? Dandelion?
Sheesh, Geralt. You look like you've seen a ghost.
A ghost wouldn't have surprised me half this much, I promise you. What are you doing in Beauclair?
Officially, visiting Henrietta. That is to say, the Duchess. We're old friends, but you know that. Unofficially, I'm saving your hiney.
It was Dandelion. After being imprisoned, Regis told him everything that happened and he couldn't just leave us to rot in prison, and so he came to persuade the Duchess to let us go free. And we even get to keep the vineyard, which is an absolute touch, even though we have no plan on continuing on with the save. Anyway, we collect our things, meet back up with Regis, and soon have a sit down to recollect on past events and of course have a few drinks. Once again, bringing an end to the DLC. Returning once again to a previous save with a much happier ending, we can now truly move on to the cleanup stage of things, with our first trophy requiring us to find all of the Grandmaster diagrams for each Witcher school. To get these diagrams, we meet up with Grandmaster Smith Ladog, I think that's how you say his name, who tells us if we collect the Grandmaster diagrams, then he will be able to craft Grandmaster gear for us. Thankfully, we didn't actually have to find these ourselves, and he gives us a quest that shows us the locations of where we can find each diagram. I'm not going to bore you with each of the locations that we had to visit, because as you can probably tell, all we really needed to do was a lot of looting and the occasional killing. It didn't take long though, and within about an hour we had collected all Grandmaster diagrams, unlocking the trophy, turned every stone. Now, having just collected the Grandmaster diagrams, we now have the ability to craft Witcher gear that come with bonuses for equipping the whole set, but only once it's at Grandmaster level. Typically, this would take a lot of resources and a lot of gold to achieve, as you would have to craft each level of Witcher gear up to Grandmaster. But thankfully, there is a much quicker way to achieve this, and that is by crafting the Manticore Witcher set. That's because there is only one level of gear for this Witcher set that we need to craft, and thankfully, this level counts as Grandmaster and comes with all the added bonuses, and crafting each piece and equipping it nabs us the trophy, Dressed to Kill. Next up, I headed over to our vineyard, and using an absolute ton of gold, I purchased every single upgrade for it, unlocking yet another trophy, Plain House. The next trophy I went for was the trophy I Have a Gwent Problem. Yes, like with the main game, we have another card collecting trophy. Thankfully though, this one is a lot easier. Rather than having almost 200 cards to collect, this time we only had 19 to get our hands on, and to make it even easier, this is actually tied to a side quest that marks the location of each of the cards we need to get our hands on. Not going to go into a whole lot of detail here, as you all know what collectibles are, just know that thankfully due to each location being shown, this made collecting them a hell of a lot quicker, and in no time at all, we nabbed the trophy I Have a Gwent Problem. This brings us to our final trophy of the DLC, and that is the trophy Hasta la Vista. And for this trophy, all we needed to do was kill a frozen enemy with a crossbow bolt, and thankfully I managed to find a cow that was more than willing to help me achieve it.
Hasta la vista.
And with that, we have now collected every single trophy this game has to offer, and so I'd like to give you my thoughts on the game, and honestly, there isn't a lot more I can say from what I've already said before in my previous videos. As I've said, this is perhaps one of my favourite games of all time. Every single part of this game I love. The story of the main game and the DLC is truly a fantastic experience. Couple the depth of the story with the characters you meet throughout it, and you've got yourself a winning combination. So in terms of story, as I said in my previous videos on this game, the story is genuinely something that I love. Bearing in mind that I have played through this game a fair amount of times, it's actually amazing that I can still revisit it and fall in love with it all over again. It truly makes me feel almost as if I'm playing through it again for the very first time every time I play it, and believe me, there are not many games out there that can keep delivering that same feeling as The Witcher 3 can, and this extends to its DLC. The world and all of the locations it offers players to freely explore are honestly beautiful, from the wine-driven, almost fantasy-like country of Tucson all the way to the shithole that is Velen. There is not a single location that feels out of place, and a lot of games struggle with this. Sometimes there will be something somewhere just for the sake of having something somewhere, but not this game. The combat is very enjoyable, although very cheesable thanks to being able to pretty much dodge every attack in the game, but even with that, it still presents a good enough challenge for players to not get bored of it. The addition of the different signs, decoctions, and the potions we can use truly add a depth to combat that a lot of games try to do, but for the most part never actually manage to truly achieve. Every sign has its purpose in different fights. Every decoction and potion provides useful benefits to taking down different monsters and non-monsters alike, should you take the time to invest in gathering materials and ingredients you need to craft them. And when playing on Deathmarch, these come in handy all the time, especially against some of the tougher beings that you can find, and especially against Dettlaff in the DLC. He is an absolute pain in the arse. The The trophy list itself for the main game and DLC, along with the plethora of missable trophies, truly makes you pay attention to the choices you have to make throughout the game, and in The Witcher 3's case, I actually fully welcome the added challenge. In my opinion, there's honestly not really much negative I can say about the game. I genuinely loved all of it. The 120 plus hours I spent playing through the story and the DLC usually would be something I dread, but honestly, I really didn't. Death March added an extra challenge I had never taken on in any of my playthroughs before, which again, the hardest difficulties is usually something I also dread, but not with this game. I mean, the fact that I had the option of changing difficulty after the main story, but didn't, and continued to complete the game's cleanup and play all of the DLC on Death March should tell you all you need to know regarding that. The Witcher 3, along with all its DLC, is well and truly a masterpiece of a game, and I would encourage anyone to give this game a shot if you haven't already, and even get the Platinum, as I truly believe you'll struggle to be disappointed. But anyway guys, this brings us to the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoy the video, even though it is reusing older content, but as I said, I am working on a much bigger video at the minute, and this gives me just that little bit of extra time, and it also lets anyone who hasn't seen my video before, who's perhaps new to the channel, experience it as well. But like I said, this does bring us to the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed the video, then a like and a share would be massively appreciated. Make sure to leave your thoughts on The Witcher 3 and its DLC down in the comments below. I love reading the comments, and for the most part try to respond to as many as I can. And if you've made it this far and you haven't already, then make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on to stay up to date with everything I upload. I hope you all have an amazing day, and I'll see you all in the next video.